Chapter 949. Xianyuan Xiaohui didn't say anything in the end. Although he was tricked by his little sister, he didn't really care. Although he looked boorish, he was actually similar to Bufang. They were both rather cold people. Looking at the backs of Bufang and the others as they left, Xianyuan Xiaohui took a deep look at his little sister. That meaningful look made Xianyuan Xian's face heat up. "Big brother, why are you looking at me like that?" Xianyuan Xian covered his face and pouted. "You little girl, don't think that I don't know what you're planning. How can I not know what you want to do as your big brother?" The corners of Xianyuan Xiaohui's mouth curled up, revealing a rare smile. It was as if an iceberg had melted. However, if I'm not wrong, that kid just now should have come to the Heaven Chief realm from the lower realm. He's immortal. Otherwise, he wouldn't have no immortal crystals, Xianyuan Xiaohui said. The expression on his face had become even colder. The lower realm? Xianyuan Xian was slightly stunned. Then, a look of disbelief appeared on his face. Is there such an amazing chef in the lower realm? Looking at his cooking level, he doesn't seem to be much weaker than Big Brother. You're underestimating your big brother. Xianyuan Xiaohui didn't say anything. He just rolled his eyes. Then, he turned around and looked at the diners who were still surrounding the spicy blood lobsters. Let's go. Let's continue the business," Xianyuan Xiaohui said solemnly. The diners immediately dispersed, laughing and making noise. No one dared to cause trouble in the restaurant because it belonged to an aristocratic family. Offending an aristocratic family was the stupidest thing to do. The power of an aristocratic family in the immortal city wasn't something ordinary people could imagine. After the crowd dispersed, Xianyuan Xiaohui picked up the plate of blood lobster juice and walked towards the kitchen. Walking to the kitchen door, Xianyuan Xiaohui turned her head to look at Xianyuan Xian, who was standing in the same place. That kid just now. If he wants to become the Heaven Chief, he's still far from it. Xianyuan Xiaohui looked at his sister and said seriously. His tone was full of confidence. Bufang was far behind, but he was already half a step into the realm of Heaven Chief. He walked out of the restaurant. Bufang walked in front with his hands clasped behind his back. Behind him were you, the Black Dragon King, and the others. Lord Go wagged his tail and walked gracefully like a cat, neither too fast nor too slow. In the city, there were silver-armored troops shuttling back and forth. Their faces were filled with urgency. This was an army belonging to an aristocratic family. Obviously, they had received the news that a small team of silver-armored guards had been slaughtered. To an aristocratic family, this was a kind of humiliation. Of course, to Bufang and the others, it wasn't a fart. Lord Go's claw had smashed everything, and they couldn't find any clues at all. The most important thing for Bufang and the others now was to find a way to earn immortal crystals. To live in the immortal city, immortal crystals were the key. And Bufang also had to think about how to open a restaurant in the immortal city. The system's temporary task, and Bufang needed to find a good time to complete it. A group of people swayed in the immortal city, which was quite eye-catching. The main thing was that this group was really too strange. Bufang used the ingredients in the heaven and earth farmland to exchange for some immortal crystals. Using these immortal crystals, Bufang rented a room in an inn in the immortal city. Finally, this group of people had a place to stay. After settling everyone down, Bufang walked out of the inn. According to Xianyuan Xiaohui, if he wanted to open a restaurant in the Heaven Chief realm, he needed to go to the Heaven Chief Hall to assess his chef level. Bufang didn't know what level his chef level had reached. Xianyuan Xiaohui said that he was a high-grade special grade chef, which belonged to the top group of special grade chefs. Basically, those who opened restaurants in the periphery were all special grade chefs. Ordinary chefs only had the opportunity to help these chefs. Bufang believed that his cooking skills should be at the special grade level. But as for which level of special grade, he needed to think carefully. As they walked down the long street, the sky was still bright and resplendent. The day in the Heaven Chief realm seemed to be especially long. Walking along the long street, Bufang saw many restaurants along the way. These restaurants were very popular, and there were diners coming and going, walking along the long street. Soon, Bufang found that there were fewer people coming and going, and the security was also stricter. Because the Heaven Chief Hall was located on the border between the inner and outer area, ordinary people were not allowed to enter the inner area of the immortal city. That was because the inner area was the area where the aristocratic families lived. The Heaven Chief Hall was a round building. The decoration was very gorgeous, and there was a horizontal board hanging on the door, which was carved with the words Heaven Chief Hall. These three big words were like dancing dragons and phoenixes, with an extremely strong pressure. Bufong stood at the door. With just a glance at those three words, he felt his mental force tremble violently, and his spirit seemed to be surging with monstrous waves. Bufong's eyes slightly shrank, and his heart was filled with fear. Just the residual mental force on those three words had caused a strange change in his spirit's sea. How strong was the person who wrote those three words? Forcefully suppressing the fluctuations in his heart, Bufong's face became slightly solemn. Striding forward, he walked toward the Heaven Chief Hall. No matter what, since Bufong wanted to open a shop in the Immortal City, he first had to obtain the qualification to open a shop. However, this qualification needed Bufong to fight for it. Wherever he went, he had to do things according to the rules. Stepping into the Heaven Chief Hall, it was a little noisy. Different from the serious atmosphere outside, the atmosphere inside the Heaven Chief Hall was very lively. The hall was a huge circle, and around it was a circle of communication platforms. There were staff of the Heaven Chief Hall standing on the exchange platform, handling all kinds of services. Bufong was a little absent-minded. This kind of lively scene suddenly made Bufong feel as if he had returned to the cities on Earth in his previous life. Shaking his head, Bufong came back to his senses. This was still a different world, completely different from the cities in his previous life. You're really King useless. I spent so many immortal crystals to cultivate you, and in the end, you only gave me the title of an advanced chef. A middle-aged man pushed a young man out of the immortal kitchen pavilion, cursing and swearing. This kind of scene was very common in the Heaven Chief Hall. There were many people in the immortal city, so naturally, there were many people who came here to handle the examination business. After the crowd had dispersed, Bufong slowly walked to the front of the counter. Sitting in front of the counter was a middle-aged woman with a rather mean face. The woman raised one hand, patting the counter, and said without raising her eyes, "Report your name, place of residence, cooking level, and the cooking level you want to test." The woman's words slightly surprised Bufong. This feeling was really familiar, very much like those impatient service staff in his previous life. Bufong, Hidden Dragon Continent, Special Grade Chef. The examination is up to you, Bufong said casually. Special Grade Chef? The woman at the front desk was bewildered. Then, she lifted her head, looking at Bufong's expressionless face. A moment later, the woman noticed an important piece of information from Bufong. Hidden Dragon Continent? The woman arched her brows, asking suspiciously. Bufong nodded. A moment later, a jade talisman appeared in the woman's hand. The jade talisman projected a light image, and the woman reached out her slender fingers to search for something on the light image. There's no Hidden Dragon Continent in the Immortal City. Tell me, are you lying? The woman patted the counter, coldly looking at Bufong. The woman's aura surged, giving off a terrifying sense of oppression. This woman's cultivation base had reached the Saint's sovereign level. Hidden Dragon Continent. It's the Hidden Dragon Continent. I just entered the Hidden Dragon Continent through the light door the Heaven Chief realm left there. Bufong furrowed his brows. This woman's service attitude made him a little unhappy. After listening to Bufong, the woman suddenly understood. Then, she revealed a playful smile. So, you're a mortal from the lower realm. You're just a mortal, yet you dare to talk so arrogantly. You dare to say that you want to take the special grade chef examination. What qualifications do you have to take the examination? The woman said, her tone sharp and unkind. You just need to arrange the examination for me. Whether I pass or not, it's none of your business. Bufong said, his face expressionless. As soon as he said that, the woman's eyes narrowed. This mortal was really arrogant. You mortal, do you think the Heaven Chief realm is the same as your lower realm? The Heaven Chief realm is not a place for you to show off your strength. Even if you're a dragon, you have to coil up. You better listen to me. As a low-grade mortal, don't even think about taking the examination in the Heaven Chief Hall for the next month. Mortals should have the awareness of mortals. Get lost. The woman coldly glanced at Bufong. She crossed her arms in front of her chest, leaned back on the chair, and looked at Bufong with disdain. Arrogant. Continue to be arrogant. So, you won't let me take the examination? Bufong narrowed his eyes, coldly staring at the woman. Just because he was a mortal, this woman wouldn't let him take the examination? Was it really that embarrassing for someone from the Hidden Dragon continent to enter the Heaven Chief realm? You really won't let me take the examination? Bufong stared at the woman, enunciating each and every word. You're so annoying. I said I won't let you take the examination, so I won't let you take the examination. It's useless no matter who you find. If you have the ability, you can complain to me. As a member of the Tong family, do you think I'll be afraid of a mortal like you? I'm bullying you, the woman said coldly. Bufong took a deep breath. Suddenly, someone tugged at his sleeve from behind. It was also a young girl wearing a white silk robe. The people who wore this robe were all members of the Heaven Chief Hall. That young girl winked at Bufong. Huh? Bufong frowned. She's from the Tong family, an aristocratic family in the Immortal City. She's very powerful in the Heaven Chief Hall. You're just a mortal, so don't quarrel with her. Don't worry. Come back after a month. Next time, just find me. The young girl wasn't very beautiful, but her words were very gentle. She seemed to have come to remind Bufong because she saw Bufong being humiliated. After a month, Bufong shook his head. He couldn't wait any longer. It's okay. Since that woman doesn't want to let me take the examination, so be it. Sooner or later, she'll regret it, Bufong said. After saying that, he glanced at that sharp and unkind woman. Then he turned around, flung the sleeve of his vermilion robe, and left the restaurant. All right, remember my name. I'm Uluer. Next time, just find me, the woman's gentle voice rang out behind Bufong. However, looking at Bufong's disappearing figure, the woman sighed. It was really hard for mortals to survive in the Heaven Chief realm. Muluer glanced at that sharp and unkind woman and furrowed her brows. The aristocratic family's disciples in the Heaven Chief Hall were really getting more and more numerous. As for Bufong, who had walked out of the Heaven Chief Hall, his face was cold. He couldn't give up the idea of opening a restaurant just because of what the other party said. Moreover, Bufong couldn't give up. Since he said he would make the other party regret it, he must make her regret it so much that her intestines turned green. Standing at the entrance of the Heaven Chief Hall, Bufong let out a long sigh. Originally, I didn't want to cause trouble. I just wanted to open a branch in peace. But now it seems like I have to. Since that's the case, let's do it. Chapter 950. It was a surprise to Bufong that he couldn't get the qualification to take the test in the Heaven Chief Hall. He didn't expect that the people in the Heaven Chief Hall would have such a strong sense of superiority, and the people from the lower realm were like inferior people in the Heaven Chief Hall. However, this couldn't be a reason to stop Bufong from opening a restaurant in the Heaven Chief Hall. That woman's mockery had stirred up a wave of anger in Bufong's heart. People from the lower realm couldn't take the special grade chef test? Who told that woman that? Why did that woman think so? Walking on the streets of the Immortal City, the spacious streets were bustling with people, and on both sides of the street, there were all kinds of small vendors selling their goods. Although the Immortal City was the largest city in the Heaven Chief realm and was incomparably prosperous, the profession of small vendors existed everywhere. There were restaurants, but most of them were controlled by the aristocratic families. For some ordinary people, they couldn't open a restaurant in the Heaven Chief realm, but they could find another way. They could set up some small stalls on both sides of the street. They could use these stalls to sell ingredients and some cheap kitchen utensils, and so on. Because these small vendors were like sticky candy, the aristocratic families couldn't do anything about it. Therefore, under normal circumstances, the aristocratic families wouldn't care too much about it. Because the situation caused by these small vendors wouldn't have a big impact on the business and income of the aristocratic families. Most importantly, This was actually a way for the city lord to keep the aristocratic families in check. Therefore, many aristocratic families turn a blind eye to it. At this moment, Wat Bufang paid attention to were the small vendors on both sides of the street. When he walked out of the Heaven Chief Hall, he had said that he would make that woman regret it. However, how to make her regret, it was actually a technical job. Should he put a wok in front of the gate of the Heaven Chief Hall and fry the stinky tofu? Disgust that woman to death. No, Bufang shook his head. This time, he didn't want to do that. Doing it would only disgust that woman, but it wouldn't make her regret it. If she looked down on others, she should be prepared to be slapped in the face. Bufang wanted to let that woman know how it felt to be slapped in the face. Wasn't that woman from an aristocratic family? Bufang narrowed his eyes and looked at the peddlers on both sides. There seemed to be light flickering in his eyes. He didn't stop too much on the street. He quickly returned to the inn he had rented. After returning to the inn, he greeted everyone and then pulled Hades' Era out of the inn. At first, Nether King Erha was a little confused. He didn't know why Bufang dragged him out. However, after Bufang stated his purpose, Bufang didn't say anything. Hades' Era's eyes became brighter and brighter. Bufang, young man, you are trying to stir up trouble. This king loves to stir up trouble the most. Hades' Era raised his hand and covered half of his face as he said gloomily, "Then let's get to work," Bufang said. Then Bufang and Hades' Era walked out of the immortal city. The first layer of the Heaven Chief realm was vast, and the spirit energy was very dense. Although the immortal city was vast, it only occupied a small area of the first layer of the Heaven Chief realm. This level was mostly made up of mountain ranges, and the undulating mountain ranges formed this world. Tall trees towered in the sky, their branches lush and leaves luxuriant. Perhaps because of the existence of the Heaven Tree, the trees in the Heaven Chief realm were full of vitality. Bufang and Hades' Era arrived outside the immortal city. This tree isn't bad. Bufang chose a towering tree, nodding his head. Hades' Era's eyes brightened. That's it. A moment later, nether energy gathered in Hades' palm. He slashed it, cutting the tree in half. The tree is falling. Nether King Erha's figure took a step back, then let out a loud roar. Crack! Crack! The tree slowly fell down, its branches and leaves shaking violently. Naturally, Bufang didn't care about Hades' Era's behavior. Bufang also chose a tree. Then, he gathered the true energy in his body, smashing it with his palm. Instantly, the tree was smashed. After busying himself for a while, wooden tables appeared one after another. Bufang put the wooden tables into the system's dimensional bag. Then, Bufang brought Hades' Era back to the immortal city. That's right. Bufang planned to open a roadside stall, just like those small peddlers. However, his roadside stall wasn't the same as those small peddlers. Finding a good spot, Bufang and Hades' Era nodded their heads in satisfaction. The spot Bufang chose was a little remote. It was a few hundred meters away from the Heaven Chief Hall. There weren't many people here, but there was no other way. This was the only spot for them to open a roadside stall. Bufang, young man, are you planning to open an open-air restaurant? Hades' Era arranged the tables, looking at Bufang with interest. Chairs and tables were arranged neatly, so he sat down and rested for a while. Originally, he wanted to borrow tables and chairs from the system. However, the system didn't lend them to him. The tables and chairs would only be available when he opened a branch. Thus, Bufang pulled Hades' Era outside to make tables and chairs. Actually, there weren't many tables and chairs. Placed at the corner of the street, it looked a little shabby. Looking at this scene, Bufang slightly narrowed his eyes. His shop couldn't be shabby. An open-air restaurant? No, I call this a food stall. Bufang shook his head, seriously correcting Hades' Era's words. Food stall. What a strange name. However, I don't care about the name. I have high hopes for you, young man. Hades' Era said with a smile, a chili strip dangling from the corner of his mouth. Bufang nodded his head. Standing up from a chair, he began to set up the wok and set up a simple stove. Bufang's actions also attracted the attention of many people. Although this place was a little remote, Many people still noticed this situation. Some people took a look and perhaps understood what Bu Fong wanted to do. They sighed slightly. It was another chef forced by life. Actually, the chefs of these small vendors weren't very good at cooking. Since they couldn't pass the Heaven Chief Hall's test, they could only set up stalls on the street to earn immortal crystals. Of course, earning immortal crystals was also for survival. In the immortal city, without immortal crystals, it was difficult to move an inch. However, more people didn't understand Bu Fong's stall, and they just wanted to watch a good show. Because the location Bu Fong had chosen was really interesting. It was opposite the Heaven Chief Hall. It was a very courageous choice. There were many people coming and going in the Heaven Chief Hall. If the chef's ability was good enough, it would be easy to cause a scene. However, there were aristocratic families in the Heaven Chief Hall. Moreover, the chefs who came to the Heaven Chief Hall to take the test were all chefs. Of course, their taste was picky. Even a special grade chef didn't dare to open such a place. It wasn't just because the customers were picky, but more importantly, it was easy to offend the aristocratic families. This restaurant was opposite the Heaven Chief Hall. It would be fine if it wasn't popular, but if it did, it would attract the attention of the aristocratic families. Once it attracted the attention of the aristocratic families, there would only be two results: to be destroyed or to be recruited. Of course, Hades' era couldn't help with cooking. He pulled out a chair and sat down in the distance, watching Bu Fong busying himself. Finally, it was time to prepare everything. Bu Fong raised his head to look at the people around him, who were waiting to watch a good show. The corners of his mouth rose. He took out a wooden signboard from the system dimensional bag. That signboard had the words "food stall" written on it. Bu Fong placed the food stall in front of the signboard. Then he looked around. He exhaled, then said, "Today is the first day of the food stall's opening. Today's first dish is hot pot, limited to 4 tables." Bu Fong's voice was very calm, drifting in all directions. However, the crowd was bewildered. Hot pot? What kind of pot was that? Why had they never heard of it before? Facing the audience's confusion, Bu Fong didn't say anything. He just calmly said, "Today is the first day of business. The first 2 pots are free. This time, the people around understood. They didn't expect such a good thing to happen. The first 2 pots were free. They could give it a try. Many people were eager to give it a try. Hades' era was a little bewildered. He had never heard Bu Fong talk about hot pot before. Bu Fong's promotion seemed to have aroused the interest of many people. They were all eager to give it a try. Since this boss said it's free, I will give it a try. Anyway, it's a free dish. That person grinned, looking a little fierce. Bu Fong calmly glanced at him, nodded, and didn't say anything. Count you in. Our restaurant's hot pot is for 3 people. Your Excellency, please gather 3 people. Do you have 2 companions? Bu Fong asked. The burly man was taken aback by Bu Fong's question. I need companions. To be honest, he really did have companions. He waved his hand behind him. Instantly, 3 strong men walked out from the crowd. These 3 strong men all had muscles that were as thick as dragons, and they emitted a fierce aura. 4 people. It should be enough, right? The strong man looked at Bu Fong, grinning. Bu Fong was expressionless, nodding. I have never heard of hot pot from a food stall. I hope you won't disappoint us. The strong man looked at Bu Fong meaningfully. Bu Fong turned around and returned to his self-made stove, then began to prepare the soup base. He didn't ask them what kind of soup base they needed. In Bu Fong's shop, there was only one kind of soup base. It was the Abyssal Chili Super Spicy Soup Base. He took out the special pot made by the system. The system would provide a pot for hot pot, but it would cost a lot of crystals. Inside the pot, the scarlet soup was surging under the calm surface. This soup base was made by Bu Fong after adding 2 spoonfuls of Abyssal chili sauce. There were also many pieces of exploding flame pepper. It looked like a wave of spicy aroma hit one's face, making people who were afraid of spicy food retreat. He flicked his finger. Instantly, a dark gold heaven and earth obsidian flame entered the bottom of the pot, burning fiercely. Holding the hot pot, Bu Fong walked to the table. The 4 strong men curiously looked at the copper pot with a strong spicy aroma. This was a F asterisk king hot pot? A pot that could be eaten? Bufong looked at the four surprised men, saying calmly, "Don't rush. How to eat it? I'll tell you." Heaven Chief Haltong, you had completed another test. Her mean face showed a trace of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted off her shoulders. All of a sudden, Tong Yu's eyes shrank. She looked through the door, looking outside. With just a glance, she saw the small stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall. Lowly commoners are lowly commoners. Setting up a stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall. I can't believe they would do such a brainless thing. Tong Yu sneered, shaking her head disdainfully. All of a sudden, a figure appeared in front of Tong Yu's counter. Leaning on it, the figure said calmly, "Look carefully at the owner of that stall." Mu Luer didn't think that Bufong would come back. Moreover, he had the guts to set up a stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall. Tong Yu coldly glanced at Mu Luer, then carefully looked at her. Soon, she saw the expressionless Bufong in the crowd. Her pupils constricted. It's that mortal from the lower realm who overestimates himself. Mortals are just mortals. They're really stupid. They actually chose to set up a stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall. Tong Yu's voice became louder. However, Mu Luer shook her head. "No, you're wrong. Look carefully at the customers' faces." Chapter 951. The expression on the customers' faces? What kind of expression can a customer have? Tong Yu was stunned when she heard Mu Luer's words. She raised her head and looked at the group of people sitting in the stall. She wanted to see what Mu Luer wanted her to see. Tong Yu was startled when she saw them. She felt that it was unbelievable. From the customers' faces, Tong, you could see a sense of satisfaction. It was a kind of satisfaction that was rarely seen on the faces of customers. It was a kind of satisfaction that only appeared when they ate top-grade delicacies. In the past, she would only see this kind of satisfaction on the customers' faces when they tasted the dishes cooked by special-grade chefs. She did not think that such a situation would appear in a street stall. Why was it like this? Could it be that the mortal from the lower realm had put some kind of medicine in the dishes? Mu Luer was also very surprised. She leaned against Tong Yu's counter and looked outside with the ladder. His eyes shone with a bright light. Hot pot. It was really a pot placed in front of them. It looked like a pot made of copper water. The pot handle was engraved with a dragon head, and there was a deep pitch-black color under the engraved lines. That color was very rich, and it gave off a simple feeling. At first glance, it looked extraordinary. This was the pot provided by the system. Today, Bufong only took out one kind of pot. This pot only had one kind of soup base, and it was so spicy that it could make people doubt their lives. When the heaven and earth obsidian flame entered the pot, the soup began to emit thick steam. A group of people crowded around, and everyone's face revealed a surprised expression. This stall, was it really going to let people eat a pot? Or could it be that there was something special about the wok? The four muscular men looked at the boiling, exploding flame peppers in the copper pot, and their faces became somewhat ugly. As people from the Heaven Chief realm, they at least had some understanding of food and cooking. However, looking at the pot in front of them, they were completely dumbfounded. They simply did not know what medicine Bufong was selling in his gourd. It had been so long, but they hadn't seen any ingredients at all. Could it be that they were going to eat the chili in the copper pot? Although some chilies were delicious, eating chilies alone, they refused. "Don't worry, I'll tell you how to eat hot pot." Bufong walked in front of the four strong men and gave each of them a pair of long and narrow chopsticks and a ladle. Then he calmly looked at them. Hades' era had already gathered beside this group of people. His eyes were shining brightly as he stared at the copper wok. He was also a little curious about the hot pot that Bufong had described. Eating hot pot is for liveliness and freshness. This freshness doesn't refer to the freshness of the food, but the freshness of the ingredients. Bufong said, "There are recipes for ingredients here. These are all ingredients related to hot pot. Since it's free for the first time, I'll be the one to decide the ingredients." Bufong said lightly. The four burly men looked at him and naturally did not refute. After asking everyone to wait for a while, Bufong returned to the stove, and the surrounding diners' gazes followed Bufong's figure. The four strong men also looked over. Taking a deep breath, Bufong's eyes focused. The ingredients used in hot pot must be fresh. Only fresh ingredients, through the boiling of the soup base, could completely release the deliciousness of the ingredients. Moreover, the processing of the ingredients was also very particular. His mind flickered. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufong's hand. The dragon bone kitchen knife, which was shining with a golden light, looked really cool. As soon as it appeared, it made the surrounding diners exclaim in admiration. It was the first time they had seen this kind of glowing kitchen tool. A moment later, a cabbage appeared out of thin air. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun, cutting the cabbage, causing the leaves on the cabbage to fall on the plate. After washing the cabbage, Bufong cut it. This wasn't difficult at all. You just want to keep the ingredients fresh. There were crystal clear water droplets rolling on the leaves. Not only the cabbage, but also all kinds of vegetables. Many of the vegetables grown in the heaven and earth farmland had been cut and processed. Bufong carried a big pile of vegetables to the four burly men. When the surrounding people saw the ingredients brought over without being cooked, they were a little bewildered. What did the chef want to do? Did he want to eat them raw? However, some smart people seemed to have thought of something. Fresh ingredients, plus a boiling soup pot. Did Bufong want these four burly men to take the fresh ingredients, blanch them, and then eat them? Could this king be eaten? The four burly men also had a skeptical look on their faces. That's right. It's just like what you've imagined. Put these fresh ingredients into the hot pot, and then scoop them up to eat. After arranging the plate, Bufong expressionlessly looked at the four men, nodding seriously. Can we choose not to eat it? Although your dish is free, you can't be so irresponsible even if it's free. One of the burly men said with an unsightly face. We won't eat the dishes cooked by an irresponsible chef. Not only us, but everyone in the Heaven Chief realm won't eat it. What he said was really a big reason. Bufong was a little bewildered. However, he was too lazy to listen to these big reasons. Ignoring the looks of rejection from the burly men, he directly poured the ingredients into the boiling soup pot. The dark bronze color was the hot pot, and the lines on it looked a little strict. However, as the soup base boiled, steam rose. A wave of spicy aroma filled the air. The four burly men were instantly attracted by this aroma. Not only them, but the surrounding people were also attracted. Honestly, the smell of this soup is really good. It smells so good, so it should taste good too. Although the cooking method is not reliable, why do I have a little expectation for this novel dish? The surrounding diners couldn't help but start chattering about it. After Bufong poured the vegetables into the pot, he didn't pay attention to the four burly men anymore. He just said, after 3 breaths, you can fish it out and eat it. Then, Bufong returned to the stove. Then, he began to process the demon frog meat. It was different from the stir-fried demon frog meat. This time, Bufong needed to use his knife skills to process the demon frog meat. Bufong took out a demon frog thigh meat. The dragon bone kitchen knife spun on Bufong's palm. After twirling the knife, the blade of the kitchen knife brushed against the frog meat, fiercely cutting it. People felt as if a meteor had crossed their eyes. A moment later, they saw a piece of demon frog meat as thin as a cicada's wing being cut out. Bufong took out a big basin, which was filled with the ice shards that Bufong had smashed. He placed the demon frog meat, which was as thin as a cicada's wing, on top of the pile of ice shards, forming a circle. Instantly, it looked like an exquisite work of art. True energy poured in, and instantly, the bottom of the pile of ice shards sparkled. Shortly after, the ice shards lit up. Under the light, the demon frog meat bloomed with brilliance, which was incomparably dazzling and beautiful. Misty white, true energy lingered, making the demon frog meat look like it was surrounded by immortal energy. Was this also an ingredient? It was so beautiful. The surrounding people were a little stunned. They didn't expect that Bufong's processing could be so exquisite. As people from the Heaven Chief realm, they had seen countless chefs processing ingredients. However, it was the first time they saw such a delicate way of piling up ice shards and then placing the ingredients on top of the ice shards. He carried the plate of demon frog meat over, placing on the table. As for the four burly men, they were still hesitating. Of course, when they saw the demon frog meat, their eyes brightened, feeling very surprised. "Why don't you eat it?" Buffon gave them a puzzled look. However, he also understood that these fellows still had some resistance in their hearts. Twitching his mouth, they were still hesitating in front of delicious food. These four simple-minded people with well-developed limbs were simply committing a crime. Buffon grabbed the long chopsticks, skillfully reaching them into the wok. The soup in the wok was still boiling, and the steaming hot aroma already had a different taste. Many people around were tempted by this aroma, their mouths watering. He picked up a piece of cabbage that had turned spicy red. Then, he put the cabbage into the bowl of one of the burly men. "Don't blame me for not reminding you. This time it's free. Next time it won't be free," Buffon said seriously. That burly man was bewildered. However, after saying that, Buffon turned around and left, preparing to process the ingredients. The burly man looked at the steaming cabbage in his bowl, as well as the gazes of his three brothers and the surrounding diners. He gulped. Then he picked up the chopsticks. Finally, he put the spicy red cabbage in his mouth. Crunch! Crunch! The cabbage was crisp and refreshing. The heat was just right, and it was full of spiciness. The burly man had just put the cabbage into his mouth, but he didn't care. He put down the chopsticks and began to chew. Since it was already in his mouth, he could do whatever he wanted. However, as he chewed, his entire body slightly trembled. His eyes shrank as if he had been electrocuted, staring at the boiling cabbage in the wok in disbelief. Without saying a word, his chopsticks went down again, scooping up another piece of cabbage. He blew on it, then continued to put it into his mouth. Good? Delicious. It's unexpectedly delicious. The burly man stuffed a piece of cabbage into his mouth. His face was red, and his mouth looked like it was about to spit fire. His eyes almost popped out, and his mouth directly turned red from the spiciness of the cabbage. Cabbage was very spicy, and the spiciness in the wok would basically be absorbed by the cabbage, because the bottom of the wok was mixed with the Sichuan pepper that Buffon had specially added this time. Buffon's wok this time was naturally different. Not only did it have the exploding flame pepper, but it also had the Sichuan pepper that he had exchanged from the system. The burly man couldn't wait to eat. Instantly, he ate the Sichuan pepper. Instantly, his mouth felt numb. It was a kind of electric shock, and his lips didn't seem to belong to him anymore. There seemed to be a buzzing sound coming from his lips. His entire body was bewildered, and he could only suck in big mouthfuls of air. So spicy, but so King cool. The burly man narrowed his eyes, his face showing a satisfied expression. A drop of sweat rolled down his forehead, gathering at the tip of his nose. This performance seemed to be somewhat beyond the others' expectations. So different? Could it be that the cabbage that had been boiled in the copper wok was really so delicious? The remaining three burly men looked at each other. Eventually, they all grabbed the long chopsticks at the same time, scooping it into the wok. After grabbing the cabbage, they blew on it, then stuffed it into their mouths. Buzz, as soon as a piece of cabbage entered their mouths, they were completely dumbfounded. The numbness from their tongues instantly spread to their entire bodies. Cool. At this moment, the first burly man had aimed at the exquisite demon frog meat on the plate. The demon frog meat needs about 2 breaths of time to cook. In the distance, Buffon, who was processing the ingredients, suddenly reminded him. The burly man didn't respond, but the excitement in his eyes revealed his mood. Picking up a piece of transparent demon frog meat that was as thin as a cicada's wing, he stuffed it into the boiling hot pot soup. Rumble, 1 breath. 2 breaths, swish. The burly man suddenly took out the chopsticks from the hot pot. The chopsticks were holding the tender demon frog meat. Just as the burly man couldn't wait to stuff the demon frog meat into his mouth, Buffon came up with a plate of sliced octopus tentacles, which were also piled on top of a pile of ice. Buffon glanced at the burly man who was about to stuff the demon frog meat into his mouth. He said lightly, "Let me tell you a secret. Actually, with the sauce it will taste better." Chapter 952. Bufong's words made the brawny man's movements stop in midair. The brawny man looked at Bufong in confusion. Sauce? What sauce? With a gulp, the brawny man swallowed a mouthful of saliva. The demon frog meat, which had been scalded red by the hot pot soup, was constantly emitting steam and thick white steam. He couldn't wait to put this piece of meat into his mouth. However, after hearing what Bufong said, he hesitated. Who cares? The brawny man made up his mind. He was too lazy to think about what sauce Bufong was talking about. He directly stuffed the demon frog meat into his mouth. As soon as it entered his mouth, the scalding feeling burst out. His mouth exhaled a mouthful of hot air. Spirit energy and steam gushed out at the same time. The demon frog meat was a Demon King level ingredient. Its meat quality wasn't bad. In the Heaven Chief realm, it could be considered a good ingredient. This kind of ingredient, together with Bufong's secret abyssal spicy hot pot soup, burst out an extraordinary taste and enjoyment. A piece of meat in his mouth constantly bounced, bursting out an indescribable feeling of comfort. Oh, so delicious. This feeling of tasting the original ingredients, it's really wonderful. The brawny man narrowed his eyes, his face full of satisfaction. His nostrils flared, and the muscles of his body relaxed. It seemed that he was completely attracted by this delicious dish. Bufong reminded the brawny man, but he didn't say anything else. He didn't take the initiative to help these brawny men mix the sauce. This kind of thing depended on their taste, and they mixed it according to their interests. In fact, if he didn't mix the sauce, it wouldn't be much different. His hot pot soup was enough to make up for the taste of the missing ingredients. However, he still prepared the seasonings in the distance. A plate of purple garlic, a plate of scale-tail, scallion, oil, vinegar, light soy sauce, chili sauce, and so on. These seasonings were quietly placed at the side, and the diners only needed to mix them. After eating a mouthful of meat, the brawny men had long been captivated by this original cooking method. At this moment, they stood up, mixing the sauce according to Bufong's instructions. After seeing those seasonings, their eyes slightly brightened. The feeling of personally participating in the cooking of a dish made them feel a sense of satisfaction. In the Heaven Chief realm, everyone dreamed of being a chef. This dream might have been influenced by all sorts of things when they were born, and then it became a goal. Although he might not be able to realize his dream of becoming a chef due to his lack of talent, without a dream, he was no different from a salted fish. Therefore, the people of the Heaven Chief realm were extremely excited to be able to participate in the cooking process. At the very least, a few muscular men's hands were trembling when they picked up the bowls used to mix the ingredients. After a moment of nervousness, the muscular men all became serious. There was a serious look in his eyes. What they needed to do now was to mix the seasonings. What is this? Purple garlic? First, a spoonful. Is this a green onion? Another spoonful. Add some cooking wine, a spoonful of balsamic vinegar, and a spoonful of chili sauce. The burly men carefully mixed the sauce. Everyone's face was filled with solemnity. Finally, they solemnly carried the sauce they had mixed and returned to the table. The surrounding people were already dumbfounded. Was there such a thing? The diners could actually participate in the cooking process. This had never happened in the Heaven Chief realm before. The dishes cooked by this boss were too subversive. Whether it was the way the ingredients were processed, the way the plates were arranged, or the way the dishes were cooked and tasted, they were all unique. They had completely overturned the traditions of the Heaven Chief realm. Finally, there was a situation where the chef mixed the sauce himself and participated in the cooking process. This made the eyes of the diners shrink. This feeling of participating in the cooking process was not bad at all. Some diners' eyes brightened, and their hearts were filled with excitement. Looking at the burly man mixing the sauce, their hands were somewhat itchy, and they wanted to try it. Everyone was eager to give it a try. After mixing the sauce, the burly man and the others returned to their seats. They carefully stared at the sauce in the small bowls, stirring it with their chopsticks and licking the tip of their chopsticks. It looks pretty good. The burly man nodded solemnly. He seemed to be very satisfied with the sauce he mixed. Each of the burly men revealed such an expression. A moment later, they picked up the demon frog meat, putting it into the boiling, fiery red soup pot. In just a short while, the demon frog meat was fished out of the water. The demon frog meat was so tender that it seemed to be jumping. When the burly man pressed it into the sauce, it was instantly stained with the color of the sauce. The heat and aroma continued to bloom. The burly man couldn't wait to shove the demon frog meat into his mouth. This feeling, the burly man had an impulse to cry. He lifted his head, and tears kept rolling in his eyes. This feeling of personally participating in the cooking process made the burly men sink a little. That feeling was really wonderful. Gulp, gulp. The surrounding diners stared at the burly men shoving the steaming ingredients into their mouths. The way they ate until their mouths were full of sauce made them swallow their saliva. Although the burly men's faces were red because of the spiciness, the happiness of being conquered by the food couldn't be concealed. The spicy aroma of the sauce, the rich aroma of the ingredients being cooked, and the fragrance of the sauce, all kinds of flavors blended together, forming a unique taste. On the other side, Bu Fong, on the other hand, continued to concentrate on processing the ingredients. Eating hot pot, besides vegetables, of course, there were other ingredients. These ingredients were varied, and each had its own advantages. The dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand was constantly twirling. Pieces of evenly cut papillion meat were rolled up, placed on the plate. This papillion meat wasn't placed on a pile of ice. Instead, it was carefully piled together. The plate arrangement was exquisite and beautiful. The distance between each piece of papillion meat roll was strictly regulated, which looked very beautiful. Reaching out his palm, a swishing sound rang out as a plate covered his palm. Instantly, the blood-colored sauce flowed down from his palm. Finally, he removed the porcelain bowl. What was left in his palm was a piece of papillion blood, which was as soft and tender as a pudding. The kitchen knife turned, slowly cutting the congealed papillion blood into pieces, then placing them on the plate. He poured some water on the plate, making the papillion blood look more elastic and more lustrous. Portions of ingredients were served. They were all incomparably fresh ingredients, and they were ingredients that had been specially processed. The few burly men were dazzled, but they were incomparably excited as they ate. Their mouths were constantly sucking in cold air. That was because of the spiciness of the hot pot soup. After all, there were 2 spoonfuls of abyssal chili sauce, so the spiciness was definitely high. However, even though it was so spicy, the more the burly men ate, the more excited they became. It wasn't just because of the taste of the ingredients, but because of the spiciness of the soup. Coupled with the fresh ingredients, as well as the seasoning they personally added, it formed an indescribable delicacy. Bu Fong placed portions of ingredients on the table, causing the surrounding diners to be dumbfounded. There were all kinds of ingredients, causing them to feel dizzy. How could this dish have so many ingredients? However, they actually felt that it was normal. The diners were shocked, but the 4 burly men ate happily. With a swipe of their chopsticks, they instantly picked up a large pile of papillion meat, stuffing it into the boiling hot soup. When the papillion meat became tender, they scooped it up and stuffed it into the sauce. The aroma filled the air, and finally, they put it into their mouths. Munch! Munch! The sound of chewing resounded in the surroundings, and rolling hot air rose, rushing into the sky. Ha ha! Awesome! Too delicious! How could it be so delicious? My sauce is the best. The burly men laughed, but soon they were stunned. That was because they stretched out their chopsticks, but they couldn't pick up any food. Oh, boss, hurry up and serve the food. I can't wait. The burly man's eyes widened, his mouth red and swollen, his head covered in sweat. Bu Fong's hands drooped, and the vermilion robe fluttered in the wind. He raised his head, indifferently looking at the burly man, saying, "Sorry, the ingredients have been served." Ah, finished just like that? Boss, that's not right. The burly man's eyes were red. After eating so much, he wasn't full at all. Originally, he was looking forward to the boss serving more to eat to his heart's content. But in the end, Bufong actually told him that there was no more food. No more food. So angry. He was so angry that his heart was about to explode. The first 2 pots are free, but I choose and match the ingredients. Don't think that you ate too little, but look for yourself. Bufong didn't say much. Expressionlessly, he raised his hand, pointing at the plates on the table. The burly men were instantly stunned, turning their heads to look. Instantly, their red and swollen lips violently trembled, because when the plates were stacked, they were actually piled up like a small mountain. Why did I eat so much? The burly man was a little embarrassed, scratching the back of his head. It was originally free, but after eating so much, they still felt a little embarrassed. Boss, then can we continue to order more? We will pay immortal crystals. The burly man looked hopefully at Bufong. They really wanted to eat more. If they stopped eating halfway, it would make them feel so uncomfortable that they wanted to vomit blood. The burly man's words slightly stunned Bufong, but he wasn't too surprised. He nodded, as though he was already prepared. His mental force moved. His mental force was released, and a small card instantly flew out, falling into the burly man's hand. If you want to order anything, use your mental force to order. I will be able to receive it. Now I will start selling the second pot. As soon as Bufong finished speaking, the diners who had been waiting for a long time instantly started to clamor. With the first person eating crabs, the people behind him followed one after another. The queue instantly became noisy. Hades' era couldn't stand it anymore. He felt a little stupid. Why did he follow Bufong out? This was completely torture. In the Heaven Chief Hall, Tong Yu and Mu Luer were shocked by the popularity of the stall. It was just a small stall, but it was actually so popular. Tong Yu stared at the expressionless Bufong in the crowd. Her heart was filled with unhappiness, and the corners of her mouth slightly rose. Popular? A mortal opening a stall. So what if it's popular? If this old lady doesn't let him take the test, he will forever be a chef that can't be shown in public. Mu Luer listened to Tong Yu's words, and she couldn't help but sigh. Why bother? She felt that Tong Yu would regret it in the end. Chapter 9:53. Tong Yu looked down on mortals from the lower realm. Perhaps it was not only Tong Yu, but the entire first layer of the Heaven Chief Realm's aristocratic families were like this. The aristocratic families had a sense of superiority. They controlled most of the resources in the immortal city, and they had countless chefs under them. Basically, every Heaven Chief had a clear position, and they were divided up by the aristocratic families. Mortals from the lower realm were not talented, so besides occupying resources, what else could they do in the Heaven Chief Realm? Naturally, the aristocratic families did not welcome mortals who occupied and wasted resources. Seeing that Bufong's stall was so popular, Tong Yu naturally felt a little embarrassed and angry, as if she had been slapped in the face. Bufong was rejected by her, but how could a person who was rejected by her do well in the Heaven Chief Realm? Mortals from the lower realm did not have good resources, nor did they have enough talent. How could they stand firm in the Heaven Chief Realm? This was one of the reasons why Tong Yu was unhappy. Of course, being unhappy was another reason. However, as a member of the Heaven Chief Hall, if she did not allow Bufong to take the test, then Bufong should not even think about taking the test. Could it be that the other party wanted to overturn the heavens? Unless Bufong could make this small stall so big that it could paralyze the entire immortal city's transportation. Looking at Tong Yu, who sneered and turned to leave, Mu Luer shook her head and sighed. The people of the aristocratic families were still so arrogant. However, Mu Luer always felt that this mortal from the lower realm was not ordinary, because the other party always gave her a different kind of aura. This aura was a little similar to her father's. Thinking about this, Mu Luer was suddenly shocked. A little similar to her father's? How could this be? What a joke. Her father's identity. How could this mortal compare to him? However, even so, Mu Luer was still a little curious. She clasped her hands behind her back and walked out of the Heaven Chief Hall. She was wearing the clothes of the immortal kitchen pavilion, But as soon as she walked out of the immortal kitchen pavilion's door, the clothes on her body disappeared, and she changed into ordinary casual clothes. Mu Luer's appearance wasn't very beautiful, but she gave off an amiable feeling. At this moment, on the stall set up by Bu Fong ordered another hot pot. The four brawny men at the first table had already eaten until their mouths were dripping with oil, and their faces were flushed red. His forehead was covered in sweat because of the spiciness. However, their hearts were burning with passion because this hot pot was too delicious. It was so delicious that they could barely contain their excitement. To be honest, it wasn't the kind of extreme delicacy cooked by the Heaven Chief. It was the kind of delicacy that ordinary people could accept. The feeling of eating meat and drinking wine in big mouthfuls was very refreshing. The four strong men looked at the menu and ordered again. The four of them should be considered relatively wealthy. Although Bu Fong's prices were more expensive, they still ordered a lot of dishes without blinking. Many dishes had been served by Bu Fong, but there were still many dishes that Bu Fong had never served. Of course, when they saw the wine, they also ordered a portion of it. This wine had them completely dumbfounded. This wine was truly ridiculously expensive. A jar of chilled Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew cost 8 immortal crystals. Although it was expensive, they still wanted it. If the spicy hot pot was paired with the delicious wine, it would definitely explode. The four brawny men wanted to explode, so they ordered a portion of the wine. The chilled Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew was brought over by Bu Fong, placing it on the table. Bu Fong also specially opened the seal for them, pouring each of them a small cup. The clear wine seemed to carry a dense, white mist, twining together. Bu Fong pried opened some ice cubes and threw them in. It looked even more enchanting. The brawny man couldn't help it anymore. He grabbed the wine that Bu Fong had poured for him, tilted his head back, and gulped it down. As the wine entered his throat, the cool and refreshing feeling made his entire body shiver. His burning face seemed to be doused with ice water, instantly extinguishing, and white steam seemed to rise. So King cool. Good wine. The brawny man was so refreshed that his whole body seemed to be flying. He roared. The next moment, they started toasting each other. The four brawny men ate the spicy hot pot meat, which had just been scooped out of the pot, while drinking the incomparably cool Frost Blaze Path Understanding brew. They suddenly felt that life could be so beautiful. Of course, for this beautiful life, they had spent a lot of immortal crystals. The second table of hot pot was also served. This time, it was 2 men and 2 women who were eating. They had long been aroused by the 4 brawny men's table manners, and their bellies were hungry. They had long wanted to taste the hot pot. They didn't expect that today they would finally be able to taste the hot pot, which made each of them extremely excited. The soup base in the pot boiled, and steam rose like a mushroom cloud, rising to the sky. Inside the pot, the red and spicy soup was boiling. After the ingredients were put into the pot, they were taken out, dipped in the sauce that they had personally prepared, and then stuffed into their mouths. That feeling of satisfaction, it was like a heavy hammer pounding on the diners' hearts. Hades Era's mouth was dripping with saliva. This hot pot business was better than he had expected. He was wrong. He shouldn't have doubted Bu Fong, young man. This young man never did things according to common sense. Well, the existence of a chef who could cook spicy strips and fragrant spicy blood lobster naturally had something special about him. How could the wise and mighty Lord Hades be so infatuated? Actually, Hades Era also wanted to taste the spicy hot pot. 1 table, 2 tables, 3 tables, the popularity of the hot pot attracted many diners around. However, perhaps because it was getting late, Bu Fong didn't open for business for too long. Under the regretful gazes of the surrounding diners, the business ended. Little hot, pack up. Bu Fong glanced at Hades Era, who was sitting at the side with a spicy strip in his mouth. Hades Era raised his eyelids, refusing to listen to Bu Fong. After working for half a day, he didn't even have a bite of hot pot. He was so angry that his nostrils were about to explode. Bu Fong cleaned up the utensils, indifferently glancing at Hades Era. The The corners of his mouth twitched. "Hurry up and clean up. We're going back to the inn to eat hot pot," Bufong said. Hades' era was bewildered. A moment later, his eyes brightened. "Bufong, young man, you're the one who said it. If you dare to deceive me, you'll really lose your adorable Nether King," Hades' era said with a spicy strip in his mouth. Then, he began to clean up the mess. The tables, chairs, and other things were all stored in his spatial spirit tool. "Owner Boo, when will you open for business tomorrow?" A diner couldn't forget about the hot pot, so he asked Bufong. Bufong put away the black turtle constellation walk, indifferently looking at the person who asked. He said seriously, "Due to the hot sales of the hot pot, tomorrow's food stall's theme will still be hot pot." As for the opening time, after saying that, Bufong paused for a moment. He raised his eyes and looked at the immortal kitchen pavilion in the distance. Finally, he said, "When Heaven Chief Hall opens, my restaurant will open for business." Since he wanted to stir up trouble, he would do it to the end. That diner was dumbfounded. What did that mean? Did Bufong have a conflict with the Heaven Chief Hall? That diner shook his head, looking at Bufong with a little regret. Eventually, he left. Since he had a conflict with the Heaven Chief Hall, it seemed that this stall would disappear soon. Muluer, who was in the distance, was also very concerned about this problem. When she heard Bufong's answer, she was dumbfounded. This mortal really had a conflict with the Heaven Chief Hall? However, in front of a giant like the Heaven Chief Hall, this stall was simply not enough. Regarding Bufong, he was a little disappointed. Did he think that the Heaven Chief world was a lower realm? This mortal lacked respect for the unknown world. Sooner or later, he would suffer a loss. What a pity for the hot pot. This was a perfect idea. Bufong naturally didn't know that his words had actually made Muluer disappointed in him. Of course, Bufong didn't care about Muluer's thoughts at all. After packing his things, he brought Hades' era along, walking on the streets of the Heaven Chief world. Soon, they disappeared. At this moment, the night of the Heaven Chief world was slowly descending. The night sky of the Heaven Chief world was incomparably dark. There were no stars, no light, and even the moon, which was commonly seen in the Hidden Dragon continent, was nowhere to be seen. It was so dark that one couldn't even see their own fingers. Of course, the immortal city was brightly lit. Lights flickered, and pedestrians moved on the streets. It was like a city that never sleeps. In the inn's pavilion, the window was opened, and hot air rose from the window, rolling and scattering. "You mangy dog, don't snatch the blood lobster that I just cooked. Wow, little Nethery, how can you be like this? This is the demon frog meat that I cooked with great difficulty. Baldy dragon, are you a pig? Can you even eat this sauce?" Inside the room, Hades' era's excited voice echoed. A group of people was eating hot pot in full swing. Bufong had prepared the ingredients, placing them on the table. The way the ingredients were prepared didn't change. They were all piled up on exquisite plates. Just by looking at them, it was too beautiful to behold. The soup base of the hot pot satisfied Bufong the most. What to eat in the hot pot? One was the soup base, and the other was the fresh ingredients. When the fresh ingredients touched the delicious soup base, it was a kind of fusion. The bursting out of it was absolutely intoxicating. And on this night, the news of a strange stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall spread like wildfire in the immortal city. Of course, this news didn't spread fast. Because the location of Bufong's stall was a little remote and there weren't many diners, the news didn't spread fast. However, everyone who had eaten the hot pot couldn't forget that unique taste. The next day, Bufong also pulled Hades' era out of the inn. Now that they had immortal crystals, the inn became their temporary residence. This time, you followed them with a cold face. The three of them came to the front of the Heaven Chief Hall and began to set up the stall. They took out wooden tables and placed them on the street. Bufong also took out the wooden board with the words "food stall" written on it and placed it outside. And as soon as they appeared, a circle of diners surrounded them. A hot pot also had the foundation of loyal diners. In the crowd, the most excited ones were the four strong brothers. They stared at Bufong, their eyes almost turning red. "Owner Boo, give us a hot pot first." Heaven Chief Hall. The people of the Immortal Kitchen Pavilion looked at the group of people in front of them strangely. Their faces were full of strange expressions. Tong Yu came to the entrance of the Heaven Chief Hall early in the morning. Seeing the bustling situation of Bufang's stall, she snorted coldly. Muluer also came. When she saw that Bufang had decided to open his stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall, she shook her head in disappointment. As the flow of people increased, more and more people came to the Heaven Chief Hall to take the test, and they all paid attention to Bufang's stall. Those who had eaten the hot pot before immediately began to swindle the newcomers, causing them to be dumbfounded. Then they all joined the army of people lining up. That long and narrow queue stretched from the opposite street to the entrance of the Heaven Chief Hall. This bustling scene shocked many people who passed by, and soon those who were shocked also joined the long queue. The experts of the Heaven Chief Hall walked out, their faces filled with anger. The anger on their faces was visible to the naked eye. A small stall actually opened opposite the Heaven Chief Hall. It's fine that it's opposite, but the queue has reached the Heaven Chief Hall. Does this person still have eyes for the Heaven Chief Hall? What does he want to do? This kind of stall can't exist. Chapter 954. This stall can't be allowed to exist. The person who said this was a manager of the Immortal Kitchen Pavilion. He was quite old, had a thin face, and had a long beard. He looked a bit strict. Manager Chun, you're right. This kind of stall will affect our Heaven Chief Hall's prestige. We can't allow it to exist. Moreover, as far as I know, the owner of this stall is a mortal from the lower realm. When Tong Yu saw the anger on the old man's face, she cheered up. She added oil and vinegar to her story. A mortal from the lower realm? The old man squinted, looking at Tong Yu. The Heaven Chief Hall was directly under the city lord of the Immortal City. As the manager, of course, he knew which aristocratic families' juniors were there. I heard that the Earth Immortal puppet of young Master Tong Chung of the Tong family was destroyed by someone when he was acting as a guide. Recently, he has been furious. He has been constantly looking for mortals in the mortal world. Young Master Tong Chung has already taken many mortals away. The old man's words stunned Tong Yu. She didn't know about this. If she had known earlier, she would have told young Master Tong Chung. Tong Chung was a member of the Tong family. Not only was his cultivation base strong, but he also had amazing cooking talents. He was the one who had the highest chance to break through to the Qilin chef realm. Young Master Tong Chung was capturing mortals. Tong Yu's eyes brightened. It seemed she had one more way to deal with mortals. Tong Yu, since young Master Tong Chung needs a mortal, I'll leave him to you. You go and clean up his stall. Remember to do a good job. Don't tarnish the reputation of our Heaven Chief Hall. The old man stroked his beard. Then, he looked at the queue in front of the Heaven Chief Hall and snorted. He flicked his sleeves, turned around, and left. Tong Yu's mouth curved into a smile. It was an excited smile. Young Master Tong Chung is looking for the mortal who destroyed his Earth Immortal puppet. No matter what, I need to report this mortal's name first. Tong Yu flipped her hand, and a jade talisman appeared. This jade talisman was the Tong family's communication tool. With a thought, the message she wanted to convey was transmitted to the Tong family through the jade talisman. As for when Tong Chung would receive the news, it would depend on the situation. But now, Tong Yu had something more important to do, which was to make that mortal clean up his stall. Since he dared to go against her, Tong Yu, this time, she must ruthlessly humiliate that mortal. Tong Yu walked out of the Heaven Chief Hall, followed by two men from the Heaven Chief Hall. They were in charge of assisting Tong Yu. The three of them walked out of the Heaven Chief Hall. Their robes, which represented the Heaven Chief Hall, fluttered in the wind. The people of Heaven Chief Hall rarely walked out of Heaven Chief Hall. They still wore the robes that represented Heaven Chief Hall. Now that the three of them were going to follow Manager Chen's instructions and get that mortal to pack up his stall, they naturally had to show some authority. Tong Yu clasped her hands behind her back and slowly walked along the queue. Her heels were a little high, and when she stepped on the ground, it made a crisp sound. The customers in the line saw the three of them. Every diner's heart shuddered. Were those three people from the Heaven Chief Hall? What did they walk out of the Heaven Chief Hall for? Instantly, their faces turned respectful. The Heaven Chief Hall's status in the immortal city was not lower than that of the aristocratic families. Some customers seemed to understand something. They looked at Bufong, who was setting up his stall in the distance, with a complicated look on their faces. What should come would eventually come. Setting up a stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall would eventually encounter such a thing. At the entrance of the Heaven Chief Hall, Mu Luer didn't move. She leaned against the door, frowning as she observed the situation in the distance. She had reminded Bufong that Bufong had to bear the consequences himself. He had to pay the price for what he had done. However, she didn't expect that Tong Yu would be the one who would do this. Enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. It seemed that mortal couldn't avoid being humiliated. Rumble, rumble. Steam rose. Spicy, fragrant, and meaty smells filled the air. It was thick and pungent. In the copper pot, a dark golden flame danced, causing the soup in the copper pot to become even hotter. It was constantly boiling. The four strong men sat at the dining table and ate happily. Being able to eat meat and drink wine in big mouthfuls was also a kind of happiness. This kind of happiness could make people sink into it. Bufong stood in front of the counter, his face expressionless. His hands didn't slow down at all. The ingredients were cut, then placed on a delicate plate made of ice. He was very responsible as a waitress. She carried the ingredients, walking to the table where the dishes were ordered. Hades Era pulled a chair and sat down in the distance. He held a spicy strip in his mouth. He crossed one leg, shaking it as though he was convulsing. The aroma of the hot pot made him hungry. Bufong always came up with all kinds of interesting dishes. All of a sudden, Hades Era's eyes focused. That was because he saw someone in the distance blocking Nethery's way while she was carrying the dishes. Tong Yu clasped her hands, a cold smile hanging on her mean face. She walked in front of Nethery, and when she saw the freshly cut ingredients in Nethery's hands, her slender brows arched. She stopped moving and stood in front of Nethery, blocking her way. The two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall behind her also stood still, releasing a terrifying aura. Stop! Show me the ingredients in your hands, Tong Yu said disdainfully. Her eyes didn't hide her arrogance at all. Yu was bewildered. She lifted her head, her face cold and clear. Tong Yu's eyes shrank when she saw Nethery's face. It was an incomparably cold and beautiful face that was as cold as ice. It was so beautiful that it made her feel inferior. The two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall behind her also felt suffocated. They were stimulated by Yu's appearance. Looking at Yu's beautiful face, Tong Yu's heart was filled with jealousy. The jealousy in her heart was so strong that Tong Yu wished she could scratch Nethery's face. When it came to women who were more beautiful than her, she always had an urge to destroy them. Who are you? Yu frowned, asking coldly. She didn't hand the dish in her hand to Tong Yu. Who am I? You don't deserve to know. Tong Yu smiled sarcastically. She reached out her hand, grabbing the ingredients in Yu's hand. Soon, she grabbed the dish in her hand. This ingredient, it's trash. Tong Yu looked at the papillion meat in her hand, which was exquisitely cut, piled up into ice shards. Although there was a hint of surprise in her eyes, her mouth didn't hold back at all. A moment later, she let go of the plate of papillion meat. She fiercely threw the plate of papillion meat on the ground. Clang! That plate instantly shattered, and the papillion meat scattered all over the ground. The ice shards were also scattered all over. The eyes of the surrounding diners shrank, feeling the pressure from the experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. They instantly sucked in a breath of cold air. What are you doing? Yu's face froze, and her eyes instantly turned pitch black. On her body, nether energy rose, instantly covering her body. A wave of energy instantly burst out from her body. Huh? A mere mortal dares to resist. Tong Yu coldly shouted. The two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall behind her looked at each other, and their energy also burst out. That energy was incomparably powerful, and each of them was not weaker than the strongest Demon King. Boom! The energy on Yu's body was instantly suppressed. Her graceful figure instantly staggered, taking a small step back. His long, straight, black hair fluttered in the wind. Everyone, pay attention. The Heaven Chief Hall originally strictly forbade opening a stall. Because no one has passed the examination of the Heaven Chief Hall, they do not have the right to open a restaurant. They are not allowed to use cooking as a means of profit. The owner of this stall does not have the right to open a restaurant. So now, our Heaven Chief Hall is going to ban this stall. Tong Yu's sharp voice rang out, lingering in the sky. All the diners were taken aback for a moment. Then they started whispering to each other. This is too much. Yeah, everyone is opening a stall. Why can't someone open one? Sigh. The main thing is the location. It has affected the Heaven Chief Hall. The main thing is that the stall owner is courting death. The diners were all filled with emotions, constantly discussing. They felt a little regretful. A kind of unique delicacy was going to disappear just like that. It would be very difficult for them to eat this kind of dish that could make people feel the original taste of the ingredients. Of course, they could make it themselves, but they did not know the essence of the soup and the recipe. At this moment, Yu's anger had already reached its limit. Facing Tong Yu's disdainful look, her anger soared to the heavens. You're courting death, Yu said coldly. In the next instant, her long black hair shot out, piercing towards Tong Yu. She wanted to pierce a big hole in Tong Yu's sharp and unkind head. However, just as the long black hair was about to touch Tong Yu's face, it was blocked by the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall behind Tong Yu. Their cultivation bases were not weaker than the strongest demon kings. In fact, they were even a little stronger. Hence, they easily blocked Yu's hair. Although Yu was very beautiful, they still had to complete their mission. Boom! A wave of energy exploded. Yu was instantly pushed back several steps by this wave of energy. She was like an enraged lioness. Yu's pitch-black eyes instantly widened. Then, a terrifying aura burst out. Nether rush. Boom! A wave of invisible energy instantly exploded, wanting to scatter the two experts. However, the two experts exchanged a look. Light flashed in their hands, and energy dispersed. They pressed their palms down, dispersing Yu's invisible attack. Nethery took a few steps back, feeling wronged. Although Yu's cultivation base was constantly improving, facing these two existences, she was still a little weak. When the diners saw their beautiful waitress being bullied like that, many of them were enraged. Their sense of justice was bursting, and they were ready to slam the table and stand up. I'll see who dares to move. Whoever dares to interfere in this matter is the enemy of the Heaven Chief Hall. Let's see how you can continue to stay in the immortal city. Tong Yu was not the least bit afraid. She was very clear about these people's mentality. Her sharp and unkind face coldly smiled, her hands on her waist as she shouted. As soon as her words came out, many of the diners, who had been blinded by her beauty, calmed down. That's right. It wasn't worth it to go against the giant Heaven Chief Hall for a woman. Moreover, they didn't have the capital to go against the Heaven Chief Hall. Hades' Era's face had long become cold. She actually dared to bully Nethery. Did she really think that His Excellency Hades didn't exist? However, just as Hades was about to take action, his eyes slightly narrowed. Then, he looked into the distance with interest. Over there, a black walk whizzed over with a terrifying might. The two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall furrowed their brows. They raised their hands, colliding with that black walk. There was a loud bang. That black walk emitted an earthy yellow halo. Then, a frightening mental force burst out from the black walk. Tong Yu's mind shivered. The two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall also felt their hearts sink. Behind Yu, a slender and thin figure slowly walked out, bullying my waitress and smashing my dishes. This Heaven Chief Hall is nothing. Chapter 955. Bu Fong slowly rolled up the sleeves of his vermilion robe. Without the velvet rope, his long hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes were indifferent as he expressionlessly walked out from a stove. His powerful mental force was constantly released from his spirit sea. Bu Fong's mental force was extremely strong. Moreover, After being enhanced by the dragon bone kitchen knife and the black turtle constellation wok, its power became even more terrifying. The black turtle constellation wok was controlled by his mental force, smashing toward the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. The mental pressure in the air made the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall change their expressions. Tong Yu was also a little surprised as she stared at Bufong. This mortal, a mortal from the lower realm, could actually burst out such a strong mental force. It was really unbelievable. However, Tong Yu's face quickly calmed down. Although his mental force was strong, Bufong's cultivation wasn't that strong. In Tong Yu's eyes, he was extremely weak. You finally dared to come out. Tong Yu's mean face instantly revealed a cold smile. She looked at Bufong and said coldly, "Thud!" The black turtle constellation wok smashed on the ground, and a wave of energy spread out. The two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall took a step back, gently exhaling. The black turtle constellation wok was really heavy. Even with their current cultivation, they still felt a little heavy. This young man could actually move such a big wok. Bufong waved his hand, and instantly, the black turtle constellation wok flew to Bufong's hand. It turned into a small and exquisite object, hovering above Bufong's palm. It was a stark contrast to the strenuous effort of the experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. You don't want to talk? It doesn't matter whether you talk or not. Tong Yu glanced at Bufong, then at the beautiful Yu standing behind Bufong with a jealous look. Her nostrils flared with anger. Your little stall? This old lady will close it down. From now on, you are not allowed to set up a stall here. Every time I see it, this old lady will destroy it. Destroy it? Every time you see it? Bufong narrowed his eyes. This Tong Yu seemed to be even more troublesome than him. However, Bufong naturally chose to ignore the latter's words. Everything seemed to be no different from what he had expected. Since that's the case, then there's no other way. I can only cause trouble. Bufong pursed his lips and looked coldly at Tong Yu. Cause trouble? That depends on whether you have the ability or not. Tong Yu naturally chose to scoff at Bufong's words. Could it be that a mere mortal dared to beat her up? She, Tong Yu, was a descendant of an aristocratic family and had a noble status. Compared to that mortal, it was like heaven and earth. Where did this fellow get the courage to hit her? Bufong shook his head, his eyes indifferent. The two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall, who were standing beside Tong Yu, shuddered. This little chef always gave them an uneasy feeling, and at this moment, that uneasy feeling was getting stronger and stronger. All of a sudden, the mental force in the air surged. A moment later, the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall felt their hearts tighten. They were extremely vigilant. Although Bufong's physical body cultivation wasn't strong, his mental force was something they couldn't help but respect. All of a sudden, the mental energy suddenly disappeared, and everyone felt the pressure on their shoulders disappear. The two experts were a little surprised. You know, I have a rule when I open a restaurant. That is, no one is allowed to cause trouble in my restaurant. Although it's not a restaurant, it's just a food stall. Bufong retrieved his mental force, indifferently looking at the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall and Tong Yu, whose face was full of sarcasm. However, even if it's a food stall, causing trouble is not allowed. Bufong said seriously. In the distance, after listening to Bufong, Hades Era's eyes brightened. That's right. This was Bufong young man's character. If he dared to cause trouble in a food stall, he should do it the same way he did in a restaurant. Stripping clothes was like the wind, always accompanying him. His Netherworld King's clothes-stripping finger had long been hungry and thirsty. He was waiting for Bufong to call him so that he could exchange for spicy strips from Bufong. With a spicy strip in his mouth, Hades Era grinned, looking eager to try. The customers who were close to Nether King Erha were all dumbfounded. Was this guy sick? Cause trouble? Tong Yu smiled. This isn't causing trouble. It's driving you away. You lowly mortal from the lower realm. As a mortal, you should have the awareness of a mortal. Do it. After Tong Yu said that, she didn't bother to say anything more to Bufong. All of a sudden, she roared. A moment later, the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall behind her took action. At this moment, his aura suddenly changed. Then, two terrifying waves of aura burst out from the expert's body. Bufong stood there with his hands clasped behind his back. The pressure was nothing to him. Bufong's mental force was strong, but his physical cultivation was too weak. It was nothing to worry about. The experts from the Heaven Chief Hall were comforted. Suddenly, Bufong's eyes narrowed. Then, he opened his mouth, exhaled, and shouted a name. Xiaobai. Sizzle. Sizzle. As soon as he said that, suddenly, lightning arcs fell from the sky, smashing in front of the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. The two experts were shocked and took a few steps back. Lightning punishment? Their faces were full of doubt. Boom! With a loud bang, a huge white and fat metal lump appeared in front of them. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes twinkled. The lightning arcs on his body scattered. After swallowing the Earth Immortal Puppet's core crystal that the Lord Go had thrown to Xiao Bai had changed a little. Although he still couldn't control lightning freely, his fighting capacity had increased several times. Xiao Bai, tell them what to do with the troublemakers. Bufong clasped his hands, looking at Xiao Bai's body. Troublemakers will be stripped as an example to others. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes twinkled. A moment later, starlight shot out from his mechanical eyes. The air was compressed. With a burst of energy, Xiao Bai's figure appeared in front of the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. Just a puppet. How dare you be so presumptuous? The experts from the Heaven Chief Hall were enraged. Troublemakers would be stripped as an example to others. These arrogant words enraged him. Thus, he gathered all the energy in his body, facing Xiao Bai head-on. Boom! 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 Xiao Bai's leaf-like palm clenched, turning into a massive fist. When the two fists collided, a huge explosion occurred. The surrounding customers all widened their eyes. A moment later, they all took in a breath of cold air. That expert from the Heaven Chief Hall was blown away by an iron lump puppet with one punch. The Immortal Kitchen Pavilion expert, who had been sent flying far away, fell to the ground. He turned over and stood up, his eyes full of seriousness. He glanced at his fist and saw that there were lightning arcs moving around it. The lightning arcs seemed to have a life of their own as they constantly drilled into his flesh, causing his muscles to emit excruciating pain. Damn it! What the hell is that thing? How could there be a puppet with lightning? You guys stand up. Deal with him. It's just an iron lump puppet. You can't even deal with it? Tong Yu saw an expert sitting on the ground. Instantly, her eyes turned red, letting out a shrill roar. Thinking of Tong Yu's identity, the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall exchanged looks. Gritting their teeth, they dashed forward again. This time, they wanted to show their real strength. However, Whitey's figure appeared in front of the two of them like a dream. Sizzle, the power of the lightning arcs increased, pressing on their shoulders. In just a blink of an eye, the lightning arcs ran through their bodies, making them tremble from the electric shock. Then, Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes twinkled. With each hand, he grabbed them, hurling them far away. His speed was extremely fast. Swoosh! The lightning arcs shook the bodies of the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. The robes of the Heaven Chief Hall on their bodies were instantly taken away. The two experts were thrown out with their naked bodies. They fell on the ground in a sorry state and sat down firmly on their butts. The two of them were instantly dumbfounded. They were really dumbfounded. What happened? What were they doing? Why were they sitting on the ground? Why did their lower bodies feel so cold? An uproar broke out in an instant. It made the two experts come back to their senses. The surrounding diners stared at the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall, who were sitting on the ground with their butts in surprise. Their clothes were torn, and they were sitting naked on the ground. That kind of desolate appearance, the surrounding diners were instantly dumbfounded, feeling a little funny, stripping as an example to others. He really didn't stand on ceremony and strip them. This boss had a character. He actually dared to ask his subordinates to strip the people from the Heaven Chief Hall. That was the Heaven Chief Hall. Offending the Heaven Chief Hall. How could they survive in the Immortal City? Tong Yu's complexion also slightly stiffened. She stared at the two naked people for a moment and then let out a shriek. That scream was so loud that it almost scared the diners around them. You, how dare you be so bold? Tong Yu's face changed. She raised a trembling finger, pointing at Bufang. You didn't let me take the test in the Heaven Chief Hall. It's fine if you don't let me take the test, but you won't even let me open a small stall? How could you be so overbearing? Bufang said, if that's the case, you can only use more overbearing methods. The corners of Bufang's mouth twitched. His eyes turned, looking at Xiaobai. Xiaobai seemed to understand tacitly. A moment later, his mechanical eyes locked on Tong Yu. Troublemaker. Strip as an example to others. Strip? Strip? How could he do that? Tong Yu's face suddenly changed. She was a woman. In front of so many people, could it be that this iron lump of a puppet would dare to strip her? Even if she put aside the fact that she was a woman, she was still a member of the aristocratic Tong family in the immortal city. Why did this mortal have to strip her clothes? From a distance, Hades' Era sneered, shaking his head as if he was laughing at that woman's naivety. She thought that because she was a woman, Xiaobai wouldn't dare to strip her clothes in Xiaobai's eyes. What was the difference between a man and a woman? Now, with the addition of the thunder, Xiaobai was getting stronger and stronger. You can't touch me. A trace of panic appeared on Tong Yu's sharp and unkind face as she opened her mouth and let out a shriek. She kept retreating, her body shivering slightly. However, she couldn't dodge Xiaobai's speed. Today, Xiaobai had become stronger. Perhaps it was because he had fused with the Earth Immortal Puppet's core. Rip. In the end, Tong Yu couldn't escape the fate of being stripped. The surrounding diners took in breaths of cold air. The sound of clothes ripping arose. A moment later, the Heaven Chief Hall clothes on Tong Yu's body were stripped, leaving only her underwear. The rest of her clothes were thrown out. She fell in front of the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. The three of them crawled up from the ground in dejection. Tong Yu was scared out of her wits. Her lips trembled as if they had turned blue. You. Today's experience was a big blow to Tong Yu. In the end, she didn't do anything. Wearing only her underwear, she ran toward the Heaven Chief Hall in the wind. She looked extremely distressed. Hades' Era looked at the three's distressed figures, laughing loudly. However, after laughing for a while, his face froze. Damn it! If Xiaobai had stripped the other party's clothes, his Hades stripping finger would be useless, wouldn't it? Wouldn't he not use the spicy strip? It would be a loss. The corners of Hades' Era's mouth twitched. Looking at the three naked people who had disappeared, he resisted the urge to call them back. The surrounding diners were incomparably shocked. Soon, all the diners looked at Bufang with sympathy in their eyes. You dare to offend the people from the Heaven Chief Hall. Owner Bu, you're done for. Chapter 956. Muluer leaned against the door of the Heaven Chief Hall. Everyone who entered the Heaven Chief Hall to prepare for the test would greet Muluer. After all, she was an important person from the Heaven Chief Hall, so they didn't dare to neglect her. Facing those who greeted her, Muluer would naturally smile and nod her head in response. However, her attention was still focused on the stalls in the distance, which had already been surrounded into circles. At this moment, the small stall had already become the focus of everyone's attention. She was also a little curious about the situation. In fact, she knew that since the people from the Heaven Chief Hall had made a move, the mortals in the lower realm wouldn't have any chance. Previously, she had already reminded him, but he didn't listen. This time, he was going to suffer. Suffering, or whatever, he deserved it. Gently exhaling, Muluer's eyes moved. She planned to turn around and return to the Heaven Chief Hall. Suddenly, her body, which had just moved, froze. She turned her head and looked into the distance in disbelief. Over there, the crowd was in an uproar. Then, a thunderous sound could be heard. Two naked figures were flung out of the crowd and fell awkwardly on the ground, making a soft, muffled sound. What was going on? Muluer's eyes widened. She felt a little incredulous as she looked over. The two people who had been thrown out, their clothes stripped, were none other than the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. How could they be stripped naked and thrown out in such a sorry state? As if she had thought of something, Mu Luer's breathing suddenly stopped. In the next moment, her eyes shone as she stared at the crowd. If what she thought was right. Sure enough, a scream that seemed to tear the sky rang out. In the next moment, a naked body was thrown out of the crowd, falling beside the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall. This time, Mu Luer's expression became a little playful. That was because the person who had been stripped naked was none other than the arrogant Tong Yu from before. Looking at Tong Yu, who was in a sorry state, Mu Luer didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The main thing was that she had never thought that the ending would be like this. It seemed to be a little different from what she had imagined. That mortal, how dare he strip Tong Yu, a descendant of an aristocratic family, and throw her out? Was that mortal not afraid of the revenge of the aristocratic families? The Tong family status in the immortal city wasn't ordinary. Even among the many aristocratic families, the Tong family was ranked in the top. Although stripping a disciple did not mean offending an aristocratic family, because the aristocratic family might not find trouble with Bufong over such a small matter. But what if? What if the aristocratic families really came looking for trouble? Once they were targeted by the aristocratic families, the fate of the mortals would be miserable. The mortals who have just entered the Heaven Chief realm still lack the respect and reverence for the aristocratic families of the Heaven Chief realm. Mu Luer sighed and said, this time, she might not be able to help Bufong. In the distance, Tong Yu and the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall rushed back with panic written all over their faces. Their faces were as red as pig liver. Their hearts were filled with grievance. How could that iron puppet with its own lightning be so strong? Earth Immortal Puppet. Tong Yu was even more frightened. She could feel a familiar aura from that iron puppet, which seemed to be continuously increasing. That was the aura of an Earth Immortal Puppet. The Earth Immortal Puppet was a precious puppet. In the Heaven Chief realm, some chefs were not good at fighting, so they would specially make Earth Immortal Puppets. They would let the Earth Immortal Puppet help them fight. Of course, there were also some people who did it purely for fun. In the Heaven Chief realm, competing with the Earth Immortal Puppet had become the hobby of some aristocratic families' youngsters. For example, the young master of the Tong family, Tong Chung, was furious because his Earth Immortal Puppet was smashed by a mortal from the lower realm. He ordered the whole city to search for those mortals. It was enough to show how precious an Earth Immortal Puppet was. How could a mere mortal from the mortal world have an Earth Immortal Puppet? There must be something strange about this. If Tong Yu thought about it carefully, she would have thought of something. However, at this moment, her clothes had been stripped by that iron puppet. Her mind was in a mess, so how could she think about other things? Tong Yu and the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall crazily rushed back to the Heaven Chief Hall. Tong Yu felt like her entire body was boiling hot. Although she wasn't good-looking, her figure was still very hot. Being stripped naked like this, the gazes of the surrounding people made her feel like she was being burned by a ball of fire. Under Mu Luer's resentful gaze, Tong Yu entered the Heaven Chief Hall. As for the Immortal Kitchen Pavilion's operation against this stall, it naturally failed. Looking at the stall that had started its business again, Mu Luer's curiosity exploded. Clasping her hands, she quickly walked toward Bufong's stall. As soon as she got close, a fragrant aroma filled the air. She was really curious about what Bufong was cooking. And what was that stall selling? Xiao Bai's eyes twinkled. After stripping Tong Yu and the experts from the Heaven Chief Hall, he stood behind Bufong. As for Bufong, he didn't care and signaled for the stall to continue. In an instant, it caused an uproar. The owner of that stall actually dared to offend the Heaven Chief Hall? Did he have something to rely on? The diners looked at each other in dismay. Then, they regained their enthusiasm. The hot pot continued to heat up. Bufong walked back to the stove and began to process the ingredients. The dragon bone kitchen knife twirled in his hand. Then he cut the vegetables that were still wet with water into slices. Mu Luer came to the stall. It was a simple and crude stall with a few tables and chairs. There wasn't much else. However, it was this extremely simple stall that attracted the attention of countless people. Interesting. Directly put the pot on the table. How do we eat it? Mu Luer's eyes narrowed, and a curious expression appeared on her face. She looked at a table of diners eating hot pot. There were 3 people at that table, and the copper pot on the table seemed to be flashing. The soup base was boiling, constantly rolling, and the heat and fragrance surged. Around the copper pot were portions of raw ingredients that hadn't been processed. Would such a dish taste good? Although she was amazed by the creativity of the hot pot, it was her first time tasting it. Mu Luer looked at the hot scene, and her eyes rolled. She directly sat at the table of the 3 people, narrowed her eyes, and said that she wanted to add one more. When the 3 diners saw the clothes of the Heaven Chief Hall on Mu Luer's body, their faces slightly changed. Naturally, they didn't dare to refuse. Hence, they added a pair of chopsticks. However, after interacting for a while, they realized that Mu Luer didn't have the arrogance of the big boss from the Heaven Chief Hall. Instantly, their impression of her improved, and they told her the secret and method of eating hot pot. First of all, you have to make your own sauce. This sauce needs to be considered. It can show off your cooking skills. A diner smacked his lips as he said. Of course, the people around him sneered at his idea. Some people thought that the reason the hot pot could be so delicious was because of the soup base and the ingredients. The thickness of the ingredients was just right. After being cooked in the hot soup base, the taste would be perfect. Mu Luer's eyes shone, and the curiosity in her heart had reached its peak. After making a sauce, she returned to the table. She picked up a pair of chopsticks and scooped up the boiling red copper pot. A piece of meat with chili oil flowing on it appeared in front of her eyes. This was papillion meat, and it was unexpectedly well received. After dipping it in the sauce, Mu Luer smacked her lips, then stuffed the meat into her mouth. Oh! In the next instant, Mu Luer's eyes widened. So delicious. Without being cooked by a chef, without any cooking skills, it could actually be so delicious. No wonder the hot pot was so popular. The spicy taste spread in her mouth, and Mu Luer's lips turned red. However, the more she ate, the more excited she became. When the diner saw Mu Luer eating happily, a smile bloomed on his face. Being able to have a good relationship with the big boss from the Heaven Chief Hall was not bad. Thus, the diner fiercely slammed the table. Owner Bu, 3 more servings of papillion meat. However, Bu Fong stood in front of the stove, the dragon bone kitchen knife flying. Without turning his head, he said, "Papillion meat is limited to 2 servings per table." The diner instantly felt awkward, and he could only order another dish. Eating the spicy ingredients and drinking the ice-cold wine, Mu Luer finally knew why this hot pot was so popular. Even though she had tasted all the delicacies in the world, she couldn't help but be attracted by the hot pot. This was the unique charm of the hot pot, and it was something that other dishes did not have. After Tong Yu and the 2 experts from the Heaven Chief Hall returned to the Heaven Chief Hall, they did not come out again. Perhaps it was because they felt that they had lost face. However, the popularity of Bu Fong's hot pot continued. When the Heaven Chief Hall closed its doors, Bu Fong also quietly ended his business for the day. Many people sensed that something was strange about it. I'm afraid Owner Bu is really going to fight with the Immortal Kitchen Pavilion. The food stall's dish tomorrow is spicy blood lobster. I hope everyone will come. Bu Fong used a white cloth to wipe the water stains on his hands, looking at the surrounding diners as he said that. As soon as he said that, someone instantly complained. Owner Bu, why don't you continue to cook hot pot? We want to eat hot pot. Hot pot is so good. It's such an interesting dish. Give me a hot pot, and I can eat for 3 days and 3 nights. The surrounding diners complained unhappily. More people hoped that Bu Fong would continue to cook hot pot tomorrow. However, Bu Fong shook his head. Hot pot? The food stall's awesome point was not only about hot pot. Next, it was time to show the real skills. Spicy blood lobster was not inferior to hot pot. When Hades' era heard that Bu Fong wanted to cook spicy blood lobster tomorrow, his eyes brightened like the stars in the night sky. Today, he had seen Mu Luer's method of freeloading. Suddenly, he was inspired. Tomorrow, he also wanted to freeload. In the Heaven Chief Hall, Tong Yu's mean face was cold and resentful. She hated that she couldn't tear Bu Fong into pieces. Her eyes were filled with malice. How could a mortal have an earth immortal puppet? Was young Master Tong Cheng's earth immortal puppet smashed by this mortal? No matter what, young Master Tong Cheng will teach you a lesson. Thinking about the scene where she was stripped naked, Tong Yu was so angry that her entire body shivered. As a member of the Tong family, she had never suffered such humiliation. She held a jade talisman in her hand, her nails digging into her palm. All of a sudden, the jade talisman flashed with radiance. Tong Yu's face beamed with joy. She lifted the jade talisman to read the message. Instantly, a crazed look appeared in her eyes. Damn mortal! Tomorrow, you're dead. When the time comes, this old lady will skin you piece by piece in my Tong family's prison. Only then can I relieve the hatred in my heart. I will wash away the hatred of being stripped. Chapter 9:57. The next day, Bu Fong went to the food stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall, as usual. Although the people from the Heaven Chief Hall had threatened him in many ways, Bu Fong was like a rock. He didn't budge at all. Today, perhaps because Bu Fong had said that he wouldn't cook hot pot today, there were fewer people in the queue. However, many people were curious, so they came to the food stall as usual. Although it wasn't as crowded as yesterday, the queue was still very long. It almost reached the entrance of the Heaven Chief Hall. In the Heaven Chief Hall, Manager Chen's face darkened. Yesterday, he had asked Tong Yu to solve the problem. He thought it would be easy, but now, it seemed that he was too naive. The children of aristocratic families can't do anything right. They can't even handle a small matter. Manager Chen exhaled, suppressing the anger in his heart. Tong Yu stood in the crowd, her face unsightly. The news of her streaking had spread. Many people were looking at her with mocking eyes, especially Mu Luer. What did that girl mean by smiling at her? Was she laughing at her? Damn it! Tong Yu was so depressed that she almost went crazy. However, she had no choice. That puppet had the power of an earth immortal puppet. Even the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall couldn't defeat it. How could she be its opponent? If this stall continues, it will affect the daily work of the Heaven Chief Hall. Yesterday, I asked Tong Yu to solve it. Why hasn't it been solved yet? Manager Chen lowered his voice and said coldly. Tong Yu's heart was full of bitterness. However, she rolled her eyes and said, Manager Chen, you don't know. That stall's owner is really arrogant. He relies on his earth immortal puppet to bully us. Anyway, Manager, don't worry. I suspect that the earth immortal puppet is related to young Master Tong Cheng's destroyed earth immortal puppet. I've already informed the young master. He will send someone here soon. What? Manager Chun was a little bewildered. The people around him were also bewildered. Then, their hearts trembled, and they secretly cursed this woman for being sinister. If young Master Tong Cheng had come, given his violent temper, this stall would have been completely destroyed, and the stall owner would have been sent to the Tong clan's prison. The Tong family's prison was a nightmarish place. Young Master Tong Cheng sent someone here personally. Manager Chun was bewildered. Then, his face trembled. All right, let's wait for young Master Tong Cheng's people to come. Now go back to work. Many people will come to take the test today. Everyone in the Heaven Chief Hall nodded and left. Tong Yu looked in the direction of Bu Fong with a sinister look. She snorted coldly and turned her head back. What she needed to do now was to wait for young Master Tong Cheng's people to come. There would be a good show to watch. Mu Luer didn't expect Tong Yu to be so ruthless. Just a random puppet could be linked to young Master Tong Cheng's earth immortal puppet. She felt that she had to tell Bu Fong and warn Bu Fong. However, as soon as she took a step forward, Tong Yu blocked her path. You want to warn that damn mortal? Mu Luer, although you're from the City Lord Mansion, I, Tong Yu, still want to warn you. It's not worth it to go against the Tong family for a mortal. Tong Yu coldly looked at Mu Luer. Mu Luer furrowed her brows. Suddenly, her eyes shrank. Behind Tong Yu, two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall blocked her, not giving her a chance to go out and warn Bu Fong. The Heaven Chief Hall was located in the inner and outer regions of the Immortal City. It was like a dividing line. The outer regions were bustling, but the inner regions were cold and quiet. However, this coldness revealed a kind of cold and arrogant nobility at all times. This time, Buffon's food stall's dish was spicy blood lobster. The diners had never seen spicy blood lobster before. In the first layer of the Heaven Chief world, aquatic ingredients were rare. They were very scarce. At most, they had seen some fish ingredients. However, they had never heard of spicy blood lobster, let alone seen it. Thus, although today's dish wasn't hot pot, it was still a novelty that attracted many people. The four muscular men seemed to be staying at Buffon's food stall. They liked Buffon's wine and Buffon's food. Today, they chose to taste the spicy blood lobster personally. Sizzle. Flames soared into the sky, and a spicy aroma filled the air. Buffon stood in front of the stove. His slender figure was as still as a mountain. His hand shook the wok, and the blood lobsters in the wok flew up, their juices splashing everywhere. Red blood lobsters flew around in the wok, their little pincers waving. This aroma was really enticing. The four muscular men's mouths were already watering. When you served the cooked spicy blood lobster, the four muscular men couldn't wait anymore. However, looking at the lifelike blood lobster, they were a little troubled, not knowing how to eat it. Hades' era appeared at the right time, chatting with the four muscular men as if they were very familiar with each other. He even taught the four muscular men once. Shoving a piece of tender blood lobster meat into their mouths, the four muscular men's eyes widened. Do you understand? If you don't, I will demonstrate it to you again. Hades' era said. Then he carefully scooped up a blood lobster, explaining how to eat it in a serious manner. The four muscular men nodded continuously. In the end, they imitated Hades' era's actions, making their moves. I think you guys still don't understand. I will demonstrate it again, said Hades' era. He stuck out his tongue to lick the gravy at the corner of his mouth. That spicy gravy entered his mouth, making him feel as if there was a fire burning in his heart. Crack! A blood lobster entered his stomach. Do you understand? It's so complicated. I'm sure you don't understand. When I learned how to eat it, I had to learn it several times. So fragrant. Do you understand? If you don't understand, don't be discouraged. With the principle of improving together, I will teach you one more time. The spicy taste is really good. Do you feel good? I will teach you a better way to eat it. Looking at Hades' era, who was eating and talking nonstop, the four muscular men didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They finally understood. This fellow was here to freeload. But honestly, the taste of the blood lobster was much better than the hot pot. Moreover, compared to the hot pot, the blood lobster was much cheaper. Instantly, the four muscular men became more and more addicted. A blood lobster and a mouthful of frost-blazed path understanding brew. The cold wine flowed through their mouths, down their throats, and into their stomachs. That comfortable feeling made them unable to extricate themselves. The aroma spread out, and the queue instantly became noisy. Everyone who had eaten the blood lobster felt that the taste of the blood lobster was completely different from the hot pot. It was out of everyone's expectations. The queue became longer and longer. Looking at the diners who were eating the blood lobster with their mouths covered in the rosy gravy, the diners in the queue could only feel their stomachs rumbling. Suddenly, a clamor came from the crowd. The diners in the queue all turned their heads to look in the direction of the inner circle. The sound of horse hooves resounded in their ears, and the green brick floor shook unceasingly. In the inner circle, there were three figures riding horses. It was a type of green horse with dense dragon scales on its body. As it galloped, there seemed to be an ear-piercing sound of thunder. That was the Thunder Dragon horse. It was a very high-grade transportation tool in the Heaven Chief realm. Only the aristocratic families could afford it. It was a divine chariot that could travel tens of thousands of miles in a day. It's the Thunder Dragon horse. It's the Tong family. The Tong family really came. Is it because of yesterday's matter? It's over. This little chef is finished. What a pity for the delicious food stall. The diners all exclaimed. The Tong family's Thunder Dragon horse was very famous in the entire Immortal City. On the Thunder Dragon horse, there were three burly figures. Their auras were extremely strong, and their eyes were filled with sharpness. Each of their auras was much stronger than the two experts from the Heaven Chief all yesterday. They came prepared. It seemed like there was going to be a good show to watch. The diners couldn't help but sigh. Clatter, clatter. The three Thunder Dragon horses galloped, and soon they began to gallop around the stall. The rhythmic sound of the horses' hooves entered everyone's ears. However, it made everyone's heart skip a beat. Someone said that you're immortal from the lower realm. The three of them rode on the Thunder Dragon horse, constantly circling the stall. The leader's face revealed a cold expression as he coldly looked at Bufong, who was standing in front of the stove. Bufong looked at the Thunder Dragon horse with interest. This Thunder Dragon horse seemed to be very meaty. He could knock it out and throw it into the heaven and earth farmland for Nyohan-san to help him raise it. My big brother is talking to you. Are you Asterisk King deaf? Seeing that Bufong didn't answer, the other expert on the horse was instantly enraged, directly scolding him. The surrounding diners couldn't help but sigh. Even Owner Bu was subdued under the despotic power of these experts. He didn't dare to speak anymore. However, Bufong just furrowed his brows. He indifferently glanced at the three of them, then let out a soft sigh. Your horses aren't bad. It's not a bad choice to use for hot pot, Bufong said calmly. What? When the surrounding people heard this, they were instantly bewildered. Was this the time to think about whether horse meat was good or not? The most important thing now was to save their lives. Arrogant, Lord Tongcheng has ordered us to capture you, mortal, and your earth immortal puppet. How could a mortal have an earth immortal puppet? You must have something to do with young Master Tongcheng's destroyed earth immortal puppet. The leader of the experts was still calm, coldly saying. His big hand suddenly waved, signaling for them to take action. Boom! His aura instantly burst out, twisting the air as sharp as a long sword. The two experts suddenly pulled on the reins, and the Thunder Dragon horse let out a long neigh. It raised its hooves high and trampled toward Bufong. Looking at its posture, they wanted to trample Bufong until he was severely injured, then drag him back. They didn't put Bufong in their eyes at all. However, at this moment, Bufong only had the Thunder Dragon horse in his eyes. Since the other party had come to deliver food, he wouldn't be polite. The Thunder Dragon horse's hooves generated lightning, which shot everywhere. It wanted to trample Bufong to death. However, in the next moment, a wave of oppressive aura instantly filled the air. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes twinkled. He suddenly appeared in front of the three Thunder Dragon horses, who had raised their hooves, facing those lightning bolts. Xiao Bai's eyes twinkled. It wasn't fear, but excitement. Puppet on the Thunder Dragon horse, the eyes of the leader of the experts shrank. A moment later, he shouted, Crush that puppet for me. Bufong used a white cloth to wipe the water stains on his palms, then glanced ahead. He glanced at the front and said calmly, Xiao Bai, don't burn that horse meat with electricity. As soon as he finished speaking, the lightning on Xiao Bai's body surged, scattering everywhere. A long stick with electric arcs winding around it, which looked like a soldering iron, suddenly enlarged, sweeping out. Chapter 958. The surrounding diners were completely shocked. Their jaws almost dropped to the ground. They were really shocked by the scene in front of them. Owner Bu dared to attack an aristocratic family's member. How could he dare to attack an aristocratic family's member? The aristocratic families had absolute power in the Immortal City. If he dared to attack an aristocratic family's member, wouldn't that mean that he didn't want to live in the Immortal City anymore? However, when they thought about how Owner Bu's iron puppet had mercilessly stripped Tong Yu's clothes, they understood. Perhaps in Owner Bu's eyes, there was no concept of aristocratic family. They remembered that someone had said that Bufong came up from the lower realm, and they couldn't help but shake their heads. Perhaps Bufong was a peak existence in the lower realm, but the Heaven Chief world wasn't the lower realm. He couldn't do whatever he wanted here. Thus, they understood that Bufong would be taken away by the aristocratic family tomorrow. After Bufong wiped his wet hands, he placed the white cloth on the stove, indifferently looking at the experts trampling on Xiao Bai. The Thunder Dragon horse was very violent. It raised its leg neighing loudly. However, Xiao Bai's body was bursting with lightning. The lightning on the Thunder Dragon horse bombarded Xiao Bai, but it didn't affect him at all. Xiao Bai even absorbed it. The Tong family's experts on the Thunder Dragon horse were frightened. What was going on? This metal puppet can even absorb lightning? Was it an earth immortal puppet? The war god's stick enlarged in their eyes, and lightning arcs danced on it. Its speed was extremely fast as it swept over. How dare you? The experts on the Thunder Dragon horse roared. They were enraged, their hair standing on end, and their eyes bulged. A big machete appeared in their hands, slashing at the war god's stick. The horse's hooves trampled, and the machete swept. This scene made the surrounding diners shiver, their hearts incomparably frightened. In the Heaven Chief Hall, Tong Yu's face revealed a crazed expression. Looking at the Tong family's experts on the Thunder Dragon horse wreaking havoc on Bufong, she couldn't help but feel excited. Die. A mere mortal dares to offend my Tong family. I will torture you to death. Tong Yu roared crazily. His sharp and unkind face seemed to have become somewhat distorted from anger. Mu Luer, just watch. This mortal will definitely die. Mu Luer's gaze was complicated as she looked at the Heaven Chief Hall's entrance. In the end, the Tong family was forced to make a move. If the Tong family were to make a move, this stall might really not exist anymore. Boom! There was an explosion. However, in the next moment, Mu Luer's pupil shrank. Tong Yu's clamoring voice also came to an abrupt stop. It was as if someone had grabbed a duck by the neck. They all looked in that direction with disbelief on their faces. Over there, 3 Thunder Rush horses that had raised their front hooves were sent flying at the same time. Riddled with scars, they fell to the ground in the distance. The 3 experts on the Galloping Thunder horse also fell to the ground in a sorry state, with lightning arcs dancing around their bodies. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. The 3 experts looked at each other. They couldn't believe what they had just seen. That Earth Immortal puppet was somewhat strong. Boom! However, the 3 of them were from aristocratic families. After thinking for a while, they attacked again. Their long blades slashed horizontally, approaching Xiao Bai from 3 tricky angles. They wanted to cut Xiao Bai into 3 pieces. However, the stick's shadow flashed, and the blades in their hands were shattered. Their faces were filled with fear as the war god's stick stabbed their bodies. Puff! Spurting blood, their eyes shrank. This Earth Immortal puppet wasn't weaker than young Master Tongchang's Earth Immortal puppet. Troublemakers will be stripped as an example to others. Xiao Bai's mechanical eyes twinkled. Then, the metal wings on his back spread open. Clanging sounds resounded unceasingly. Lightning arcs flashed and thunder rumbled. It was as if a bolt of lightning had just flashed. Xiao Bai's figure disappeared from his spot. A moment later, 3 miserable screams resounded. Ripping sounds resounded, and cloth fluttered in the air. The 3 experts of the Tong family had tears and snot streaming down their faces. They felt as if they had nothing left to live for as they were stripped naked and fell to the ground. Their eyes were dull, and they looked a little listless. It was the kind of feeling one would have after experiencing a huge blow. The surrounding diners sucked in a breath of cold air. They felt as if their eyes were dazzled. In the next moment, the 3 experts of the aristocratic families were stripped naked and thrown out. Why was this scene so similar? Where had they seen it before? Tong Yu's entire body shivered. This scene was exactly the same as when she was stripped naked. Was this puppet a pervert? Did it like to strip people's clothes? Bufong clasped his hands, walking slowly. He arrived in front of the 3 Thunder Dragon horses that were lying on the ground, twitching unceasingly. These 3 horses had been electrocuted by Xiao Bai's lightning. Their mouths were foaming, and it seemed they wouldn't be able to recover in a short time. His mind flickered. A suction force burst out, sucking the 3 Thunder Dragon horses into the heaven and earth farmland. Indifferently sweeping his eyes over the 3 experts who were stripped naked, he turned to the diners and said, "Let's continue the business." The surrounding diners didn't seem to notice at this moment. They were a little bewildered. They were stripped naked again. The troublemakers were all stripped naked. Owner Bu wanted to ascend to the heavens. This time, they were the real experts of the aristocratic families. In the distance, the corners of Mu Luer's mouth twitched. Her eyes were a little strange as she looked at Bu Fong. This Owner Bu really had some character. Why is it like this? Tong Yu was dumbstruck, her entire body shivering. Even the experts of the aristocratic families couldn't take down Bu Fong. Why is it like this? Don't tell me you don't know. If you didn't stop him from taking a chef test, how could he set up a stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall? Mu Luer glanced at Tong Yu, speaking indifferently. Tong Yu's face twitched. Yeah, it seemed like it was all because of her. If she hadn't rejected Bu Fong's test application, Bu Fong wouldn't have set up a stall outside. However, if Tong Yu had to admit that she was wrong, she wouldn't admit it even if she was beaten to death. Even if she regretted it in her heart. Behind her, Manager Chin's group walked out once again. Manager Chin's face was a little gloomy. He also saw the situation in the distance, and his face was incomparably cold. Tong Yu, didn't I tell you to handle it properly? Why are you still making such a ruckus? Manager Chin shouted in a somewhat strict tone. What should Tong Yu say? She couldn't say anything. The experts of the aristocratic families had also taken action, but they couldn't do anything to that fellow. What else could she do? Could it be that she could ask the experts of her family who were in seclusion to take action? Not to mention whether she had the face to do so. Even if she had the face to do so, the other party wouldn't take action for a mere mortal. She could only grit her teeth and swallow this bitterness into her stomach. She couldn't say it out loud. Manager Chun, actually, it's very simple to solve this matter. Mu Luer glanced at Tong Yu, the corners of her mouth rising. Then, she looked at Manager Chun and said. Manager Chin was stunned, and he seriously asked Mu Luer. Thus, Mu Luer told him about how Bu Fong had come to take the test, but was rejected by Tong Yu. She also told him why Bu Fong had opened his restaurant, and why Bu Fong's restaurant had become so popular. Tong Yu was the one to blame for all the mistakes. After Manager Chen listened to her, he stroked his beard. So the reason was like this. He glanced at Tong Yu, who was as quiet as a cicada in winter. You didn't even take the test, and you already told him to scram. Who gave you the right to do so? My Heaven Chief Hall oversees the immortal city in order to select talented young chefs. You could have offended anyone, but you had to offend a powerful chef. Manager Chun said coldly. This time, your mistake is unforgivable. This position is no longer suitable for you. Go back to your Tong family. What? The surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. Tong, you've been fired. An aristocratic young master who had a position in the Heaven Chief Hall was actually fired just like that. To Tong Yu, this was like a bolt from the blue. No. Why did you make me leave? For a mere mortal, you made me leave. I'm not convinced. I'm a member of the Tong family. You can't treat me like this. Tong Yu was stunned for a moment. Then she screamed crazily. Her eyes were filled with madness as she continuously retreated. She didn't dare to believe this illusion. Her great position had actually been dismissed because of this mortal. How could she accept this? The Tong family is so amazing. Don't forget, this is the City Lord's territory, and this old man serves the City Lord. All the troubles were caused by you. This is the price you have to pay. Manager Chin said coldly as he flicked his sleeves. Mu Luer, I'll leave this matter to you. Go and tell the stall owner to allow him to take the test. To be able to make his stall so popular, this old man believes that his cooking skills shouldn't be weak. It's a waste for a good chef to open a stall, Manager Chin said. Mu Luer froze. She didn't think that Manager Chan would actually make such a decision. She immediately nodded her head. Okay. Then, Manager Chin coldly snorted, sweeping his eyes over Tong Yu. He flicked his sleeves and left. The surrounding people looked at Tong Yu with sympathy. She tried to steal a chicken, only to end up losing the rice used to lure it. Tong Yu was used to being domineering and looked down on mortals. Now, because of a mortal, she was being punished. Tong Yu's intestines were green with regret. Why did she have to provoke Bu Fong? Why didn't she just let him take the test? What was she trying to show off for? Outside, the three experts from the aristocratic families ran away in disgrace. Their upper bodies were naked, and they looked incomparably embarrassed as they ran away. They were already the laughingstock of everyone. Should they stay and feel the ridicule of the surrounding people? That mortal was really too arrogant. Also, that iron puppet wasn't ordinary. It seemed to be an earth immortal puppet. How could a mere mortal have an earth immortal puppet? This mortal was definitely related to Lord Tong Cheng's earth immortal puppet being destroyed. No matter if it was related or not, this time, it was related. The eyes of the three experts from the Tong family were cold. Of course, Bufang didn't know about this. However, when Mu Lu'er came to find him again, he was a little surprised. When Mu Lu'er told him that Tong Yu had received the punishment she deserved and was expelled from the Heaven Chief Hall, Bufang was a little surprised. This Tong Yu was too weak. He thought that he would have to open his food stall for a few more days to make the other party regret it deeply. Mu Lu'er also brought him a piece of good news. That news was that she wanted Bufang to go to the Heaven Chief Hall to take the special grade chef test. This news made Bufang stunned for a while. Originally, according to Bufang's arrogant character, he wanted to reject it. However, thinking that if he wanted to open a shop in the Immortal City, he needed to obtain the qualification. For the sake of opening a branch, Bufang finally agreed to Mu Lu'er's request. Of course, Bufang also had a request. He wanted the test to wait until the next day, after he finished the food stall's business today. Regarding this, Mu Lu'er naturally had no objection. Mu Lu'er was also very interested in Bufang's fragrant spicy blood lobster. Hence, she joined the table to eat and drink for a while. The taste is really not bad. Mu Lu'er had a lobster in her left hand and a lobster in her right hand. She ate until her mouth was full of oil, nodding her head continuously. On the other side, Tong Yu and the three experts of the Tong family returned to the inner area of the Tong family. This attracted the attention of many people from the Tong family. The three of them and Tong Yu walked through the garden-like courtyard of the Tong family's residence. Finally, they arrived in front of a small courtyard. The three experts were wearing simple clothes. They knelt in front of the small courtyard, solemnly cupping their fists. Young Master Tong Cheng, we have found the person who destroyed your earth immortal puppet. As soon as they finished speaking, a creaking sound rang out. The door of the small courtyard slowly opened. Then, a figure walked out of the small courtyard with his hands clasped behind his back. Have you found him? Didn't I tell you to break his limbs and bring him back? Where is he? Chapter 959. It was a man wearing a flashy golden robe and a pair of flood dragon boots. He wore a purple gold crown on his head, and his face was fair. However, the ruthlessness in his eyes was frightening. He was Tong Cheng, the young master of the aristocratic Tong family in the Immortal City. As a chef who had reached the Immortal Chef realm, he had a high position in the entire Immortal City. No matter where he went, the Heaven Chief's position was always high. Tong Cheng played with a jade bead in his hand, indifferently glancing at the three miserable experts kneeling outside the door. Didn't I ask you to break their limbs and bring them back? The three experts exchanged looks, their faces filled with helplessness. They had reported everything to Tong Cheng and didn't hide the fact that they had been stripped by a puppet. After reporting, they lowered their heads and didn't say anything. You've really become capable. Three Divine Spirit Realm experts who have ignited 8 divine flames together with a Thunder Dragon horse can't even deal with a puppet, Qin Wentian said. Tong Cheng played with the jade bead, sneering. However, the puppet that came from the lower realm is actually this powerful. The three of you couldn't even withstand it. Looks like it's an Earth Immortal puppet. This young master wants to have a good look at this Earth Immortal puppet. The corners of Tong Cheng's mouth rose, revealing a faint smile. A burst of energy shot out from his palm, crushing the jade bead. Xianyuan Xiaohui exhaled. The heavy, pitch-black kitchen knife in her hand slammed down, smashing the chopping board into pieces. Hearing the commotion, Xianyuan Xian immediately ran in. He seemed to be worried that something bad had happened to Xianyuan Xiaohui. After seeing Xianyuan Xiaohui's appearance, he let out a long sigh. Big brother, are you okay? Xian Yuan Xian cautiously asked as he looked at Xian Yuan Xiaohui, who was panting and sweating in the distance. Xian Yuan Xiaohui opened his eyes and looked at Xian Yuan Xian lovingly. He swung his arms and let out a long breath. Silly girl, what could happen to your brother? That's good. Brother, don't worry. It's very difficult for a special class chef to become a heaven chief. Let's take it slow, step by step, Xian Yuan Xian said. Xian Yuan Xiaohui looked at his younger sister's well-reasoned manner and instantly narrowed his eyes as he rubbed his chin. Step by step, tomorrow, we'll go to the Heaven Chief Hall to take the Heaven Chief examination. Xian Yuan Xian wanted to say something, but after hearing Xian Yuan Xiaohui's words, the words in his mouth were stuck in his throat. She stared at Xian Yuan Xiaohui and opened her mouth, but no words came out. After a long time, the woman was so excited that she looked like she was about to jump up from the ground. Brother, do you have confidence in yourself? You broke through. I didn't break through, but I'm a little confident now. Xian Yuan Xiaohui narrowed her eyes. Her heart was also surging with emotions. He had finally touched the barrier of the Heaven Chief. This time, he must shock the entire Immortal City. After all, the Immortal City hadn't had a new Heaven Chief for a long time. The Heaven Chief Hall was closed. Bufang had also ended his business. At the same time, Bufang also told the diners about the closure of the restaurant and the reason. The diners were very happy. Did owner Bu plan to open a restaurant? If so, they didn't need to be on tenterhooks to eat delicacies on the street. However, owner Bu was very confident. If he wanted to open a restaurant in the Immortal City, he must be certified as a special class chef. Could owner Bu become a special class chef? Although the hot pot and the fragrant spicy blood lobster were excellent dishes, in terms of difficulty, they couldn't be compared to the dishes cooked by a special class chef. Bufang didn't explain anything. In fact, he didn't need to explain anything. He was very confident in his cooking skills. Perhaps he wanted to become the Heaven Chief. After cleaning up the stall, he brought Yu and Hades' Era back to the inn. The Lord Go was still lying on the ground, snoring loudly, as though he could never get enough sleep. Hua, this little girl, was leaning on the Lord Go, hugging the Lord Go's tail and taking a nap. The Black Dragon King was sitting on a chair far away, glancing at Hua from time to time. No matter what, she was his daughter, but in the end, she was relying on a dog. His heart was so stifled that he couldn't breathe. Bufang's return woke Hua up from her nap. Because Bufang's return meant that there would be good food. Yesterday's hot pot made her yearn for more. Today, she didn't know what would be good, and Bufang didn't disappoint. After he came back, he started to cook. Night fell. From the inn's window, steam billowed out, accompanied by the rich aroma of food. Although tomorrow was the special grade chef assessment, Bufang didn't care or worry about it. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Bufang lay on the bed and slept. The room was very quiet. The next day, the sun was high up in the sky. Bufang got up, stretched his body, and cooked egg-fried rice to fill his stomach. After that, he made a plate of sweet and sour ribs for the Lord Go. Then, he packed his things and went out. He had promised Mu Luer that he would go to the Heaven Chief Hall to take the special grade chef assessment. There were many special grade chefs in the Immortal City, but there were more of them than the Heaven Chief. After becoming a special grade chef, one could open a restaurant in the outer ring of the Immortal City. After becoming the Heaven Chief, one could open a restaurant in the inner ring. This was a supreme honor. The Heaven Chief was a realm that many chefs dreamed of. Of course, Bufang didn't think too much about it. Walking on a long street, Bufang walked straight, heading toward the Heaven Chief Hall. The stall opposite the Heaven Chief Hall had been open for a few days. Many people were familiar with Bufang, so they greeted Bufang. Bufang also nodded in response. When he arrived at the entrance of the Heaven Chief Hall, Mu Luer was already waiting there. Finally, you're here. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Mu Luer smiled at Bufang. She was really curious about Bufang's cooking level, so she was looking forward to Bufang's assessment. He didn't understand why the other party was so excited, but out of courtesy, Bufang still nodded to Mu Luer. I've been waiting for a long time. Come, I'm really looking forward to your cooking. To be able to think of hot pot and fragrant spicy blood lobster, How good are you? Mu Luer brought Bu Fong to the depths of the Heaven Chief Hall. Along the way, many people in the Heaven Chief Hall stared at Bu Fong with strange gazes. These people recognized Bu Fong. In the past few days, Bu Fong had caused an uproar. So how could they not recognize him? Tong Yu had been destroyed by this fellow. This fellow was really a ruthless person. Among them, Bu Fong felt two frightened gazes. Those two were the two experts from the Heaven Chief Hall who had been stripped naked like Tong Yu. They still had lingering fears about that memory. Following Mu Luer up the spiral staircase, Bu Fong's footsteps suddenly stopped. That was because a familiar figure was walking toward him. "It's you." Xianyuan Xiaohui was a little surprised, looking at Bu Fong. Xianyuan Xian looked at Bu Fong with a strange gaze. He didn't think that he would meet the two of them here. "Are you here to take the special grade chef test?" Xianyuan Xiaohui frowned, asking, "It's been a few days. Why haven't you finished the test yet?" Of course, there was a story that couldn't be described. Bu Fong was too lazy to tell Xianyuan Xiaohui those stories, so he just nodded. "My big brother is here to take the Heaven Chief test today." Not knowing why, Xianyuan Xian, who was standing beside Xianyuan Xiaohui, suddenly opened his mouth, his eyes full of pride. As soon as he said that, the eyes of the surrounding people couldn't help but fall on Xianyuan Xiaohui. "Xiao Xian, everyone don't mind me. I'm just here to try. The Heaven Chief is every chef's goal, and I'm also striving for this goal," Xianyuan Xiaohui explained with a smile. However, since she dared to take the Heaven Chief test, she naturally had some confidence. Everyone looked at Xianyuan Xiaohui with a little surprise. Creak! The door in the distance opened. Manager Chen walked out. He was in charge of handling things, so he was a little surprised to see so many people. His gaze swept over Bu Fong, and there was a hint of coldness in it. When he looked at Xianyuan Xiaohui, his eyes became much gentler. "Xiaohui, come here. This time, this old man will personally help you." Manager Chen smiled at Xianyuan Xiaohui. Xianyuan Xiaohui's face revealed a look of gratitude. "With old Chen's help, I feel that my chance is a little higher." Of course, this was just a compliment, but Manager Chen was very happy to hear it. The Heaven Chief test is very difficult. You have to rely on yourself. This old man just wants to witness the birth of a new Heaven Chief. It's been a long time since a new Heaven Chief appeared in a mortal city, Manager Chen said with a smile. Then, Xianyuan Xiaohui said goodbye to Bu Fong, then walked toward Manager Chen. "Let's go." Xianyuan Xiaohui's talent is not bad. This time, she has a high chance of becoming the Heaven Chief, Mu Luer said emotionally. Mu Luer sighed with a hint of envy in her eyes. Her cooking talent was not good. Otherwise, she would have risked her life to fight for the position of Heaven Chief. However, she didn't care about Xianyuan Xiaohui's Heaven Chief test. Right now, she needed to pay attention to Bu Fong's special grade chef test. After all, she was more curious about Bu Fong. "Pardon me for asking, but if I want to take the Heaven Chief test, can I?" Following behind Mu Luer, Bu Fong asked. Mu Luer was stunned. Then, she smiled and said, "Don't bite off more than you can chew. It's very difficult to become the Heaven Chief. Some people can't even touch the threshold in their entire lives. Of course, if you want to take the Heaven Chief test, you must first become a special grade chef. If you can't even become a special grade chef, it means that you don't have the qualifications to become the Heaven Chief. You don't even have the qualifications to take the Heaven Chief test. Become a special grade chef?" Bu Fong narrowed his eyes and nodded. Then, he would become a special grade chef first. "We're here. Our test room is here." Finally, the two of them walked in front of a door. Mu Luer took out a jade talisman and pressed it on the door lock. Lines appeared on the door, and with a creaking sound, the door opened. Bu Fong and Mu Luer stepped in. They were going to take the special grade chef test. At the entrance of the Heaven Chief Hall, a dazzling carriage stopped in front of the carriage. The horse pulling the carriage was the Thunder Dragon horse. However, compared to the Thunder Dragon horse that Bu Fong had taken to the Heaven and Earth farmland, it was much more spirited. The guard pulled the curtain of the carriage open, and the beaded curtain shook. From within the carriage, a man wearing a flamboyant golden robe walked out. He wore a purple gold crown and a pair of dragon boots. As soon as the man appeared, he was as dazzling as the scorching sun, attracting everyone's attention. It's the immortal chef, Lord Tong Chung, the genius of the Tong family in the immortal city, Tong Chung. Why is Lord Tong Chung here? Finally, I see my legendary idol. It's the Heaven Chief. As soon as the man appeared, the entire crowd clamored. Tong Chung was playing with a jade bead in his hand, his eyes indifferent. He raised his head. His hair fell down from his forehead, and he used 2 fingers to pinch it and slightly push it aside. That mortal is taking the special grade chef test in the Heaven Chief Hall? Do you think that I can't do anything to you after you become a special grade chef? Really? Too naive? You still have to break your limbs. Even if you become a special grade chef, it will still be the same. Chapter 960. Tong Cheng's appearance was beyond everyone's expectations. An immortal chef appearing in the Heaven Chief Hall would cause a commotion. Many people excitedly looked at Tong Chung, their eyes gleaming with excitement. Everyone was paying attention to Tong Cheng's movements and his figure. Tong Chung looked confident and at ease. He was fiddling with a jade bead in his hand, a cold smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. He scanned around. There were many people in the Heaven Chief Hall, especially in the main hall. As soon as he appeared, he became the center of attention. However, Tong Chung was already used to being the center of attention. Thus, he didn't feel anything special. The reason he came to the Heaven Chief Hall today was because of that mortal. That mortal wanted to take the special grade chef test. If he took the test to become a special grade chef, he would receive the protection of the Heaven Chief Hall. Perhaps that mortal wanted to do that. Since he had offended Tong Chung, he had no choice but to risk his life to take the special grade chef test. However, it wasn't easy to become a special grade chef. Mortals from the lower realms who came to this world had limited talents and resources. Becoming a special grade chef was harder than reaching the heavens. Tong Chung clasped one hand behind his back, while the other was fiddling with the jade bead. Behind him, there were a few guards with powerful auras, and there was also a figure wrapped in golden splendor. That figure looked similar to the one who had received him at the entrance to the Heaven Chief Hall. Apparently, it was also an Earth Immortal puppet. However, this Earth Immortal puppet was a little dimmer than the one who had received him. Its aura and power were also a little weaker. Someone from the Heaven Chief Hall came to receive Tong Chung. Facing a Heaven Chief, even the Heaven Chief Hall didn't dare to slight him. Immortal Chef Tong Chung, I wonder what brings you here today. An expert from the Heaven Chief Hall respectfully asked Tong Chung. Tong Chung gave that expert a sidelong glance, the corners of his mouth rising slightly. I'm looking for someone, Tong Chung said. Looking for someone? The expert from the Heaven Chief Hall was bewildered. Then, a smile appeared on his face. Tong Chung, is the Heaven Chief here to see Manager Chun? It just so happens that today, Manager Chun is in charge of the assessment of a Heaven Chief, the expert said. Tong Chung, who had been nonchalant, raised his eyebrows. The Heaven Chief's assessment? Someone came to take the Heaven Chief test? Tong Chung was a little surprised. It had been a long time since the Heaven Chief Hall had a new Heaven Chief. Yes. Therefore, everyone is looking forward to today. I wonder if there will be a new Heaven Chief. A glimmer of hope flashed through the expert's eyes. Tong Chung nodded his head. His eyes flickered as he pondered for a bit and said, "Take me to the spectator seats for the Heaven Chief assessment. If the candidate can pass, then he will be a brand new Heaven Chief. The Tong family must rope him in as soon as possible." The expert was taken aback for a moment, then he nodded. Tong Chung played with the jade bead as he followed the expert. Although the purpose of his trip was to find Bu Fong, a mere special grade chef was not worthy of his attention. Compared to a Heaven Chief, the Heaven Chief was more important. If he could rope in a Heaven Chief, Tong Cheng's status in the Tong family would rise again. It was easy to kill mortals, but it was hard to find a heaven chief. He happened to be here today. If he had come a little later, that person would have passed the assessment and become the heaven chief. Then, the heaven chief would have been roped in by the other aristocratic families. Hence, under everyone's gazes, Tong Chung followed the expert from the heaven chief hall to the room where Manager Chun was going to test Xianyuan Xiaohui. Of course, Bufang didn't know that Tong Chung had come. Of course, even if he knew, he wouldn't care. His task today was to take the special grade chef test. Following Mu Luer, he entered the room. It was a big and spacious room, which looked like a small square. In the center of the square was an ancient stove. That stove had many patterns carved on it, which made it look very mysterious. In addition to the stove, there were 3 tables and 3 seats in front of the stove. Those 3 seats were the judges. The dishes cooked by a special grade chef needed to be tasted and evaluated by the 3 judges. If one of the 3 judges wasn't satisfied, it meant that the special grade chef test had failed. As soon as Bufang entered the room, many people in the room turned their heads to look at him. They were all here to take the special grade chef test. Compared to the heaven chief, there were many more people here to take the special grade chef test. Those who came to take the test all had some degree of confidence. Every time they failed the test, it would deal a blow to the chef's confidence. If it was too much of a blow, it would be hard for them to improve their cooking skills. Thus, no one would take the test easily. Once they took the test, they would have at least a 90% chance of passing. Similarly, the Heaven Chief test was the same. This was also the reason why the Heaven Chief test had attracted so many people's attention. You should wait for a while. There are 3 more candidates before you. You have to wait for them to finish the test before you can take the test. Mu Luer said to Bufang. Bufang nodded. He wasn't in a hurry. He could also see the standard of the chefs in the Heaven Chief world. What was the standard of the special grade chef test? In the field, a female chef was taking the test. The chef was wearing an exquisite chef robe. The patterns on the sleeves and collar were very exquisite. Moreover, his every movement carried a kind of luxurious aura. As soon as the female chef entered the field, her mental state changed dramatically. Her eyes became very sharp. With a shake of her hand, a long kitchen knife fell in her hand. The kitchen knife spun in her hand, and soon the knife light flashed. In front of her, a huge square piece of spirit beast meat was placed. The kitchen knife spun, and soon she began to carve on that piece of spirit beast meat. Gouge, pick, cut, stab. Her movements were as smooth as floating clouds and flowing water. Moreover, one could see that piece of meat moving fast. Eventually, the female chef patted, scattering all the meat residue on the piece of meat. With a gurgling sound, the piece of meat was carved into a ferocious spirit beast. It was full of spirituality, as though it could come to life at any time. Her knife skills attracted the entire audience's cheers. Many people were amazed by her knife skills. Not only her knife skills, but this woman's understanding of carving was also very profound. After carving the ingredient, the female chef began to prepare the other ingredients. Her mental force diffused. As soon as it was released, the audience burst into an uproar. This was because everyone could see that the color of the simple and mysterious stove was changing. It had turned into a scarlet color. The stove could change color? Even Bufang was a little bewildered. Mu Luer wasn't surprised. She looked at Bufang and explained, "This stove can change color according to the examinee's mental force. This is also one of the tests. If it can't even change color, how can it be considered a special grade chef?" There are a total of 3 colors on the stove. One is green, one is crimson, and the last one is silver. Different colors represent different levels of mental fluctuations. To a chef, a strong mental force means that the cooking process will be much easier and the degree of completion will be more perfect. Mu Luer said. After listening to her, Bufang narrowed his eyes. This female chef could make the stove emit a scarlet color, which meant that the strength of her mental force was not bad. Bufang could sense that woman's cultivation base. After all, Bufang's mental force was very strong. If he added the dragon bone kitchen knife spirit and the black turtle constellation walk spirit, his mental force could reach the peak of the divine spirit realm. That woman's cultivation base was roughly equivalent to the strongest demon king. Her mental force might be a little stronger, but it was still a little bit away from the sovereign realm with 9 divine flames. However, with this kind of cultivation base, she should have a high chance of passing the special grade chef test. Her mental force spread for a while. After a long time, the steamer was opened. Hot steam rose up from the ground. In the midst of the steam, there was a wave of fragrance. Many people around exclaimed in surprise. Looking at the dish that was taken out of the steamer, they were a little dazed. In their ears, the roar of a beast seemed to resound. This beast roar seemed to be real. Then, the dish that was taken out of the steamer seemed to emit light, which was vivid and lifelike, as though it had come to life. It was a spirit beast that was placed on a plate. However, after a closer look, that spirit beast still didn't move. That woman took out 3 porcelain plates. The slender kitchen knife in her hand spun, then slashed at the steamed spirit beast meat. In an instant, 3 hooves of the spirit beast were cut off. Placing the hooves on a white porcelain plate, the woman took out seasoning and sauce, pouring it over the hooves. Then the dish was completed. She brought the dish to the judges' table, letting the 3 judges taste it. This is a kind of realistic cooking method. It's the cooking technique of the Gongshu family in the Immortal City. By carving ingredients that are vivid and lifelike, cooking them, and finally processing them, the dish will have a very good taste. Moreover, it will give the dish a kind of spirit beast soul. Mu Luer said. She seemed to be very clear about this cooking method. Soul? When Bufang heard Mu Luer's words, he instantly narrowed his eyes. The soul you're talking about should be condensed and formed by the chef's mental force. It's a kind of remnant mental force hidden in the ingredients, right? Bufang said. Mu Luer was a little surprised, looking at Bufang. She didn't think that Bufang could judge it so easily. That's right. However, this method is unique to the Gongshu family. Ordinary chefs don't know how to do it. If the dish has a soul, eating it will make people's souls throb. It's really a good cooking technique. Bufang nodded, worthy of being the Heaven Chief realm. It's really strange. Bufang sighed inwardly. In the square, the 3 judges began to evaluate the woman's dish. It wasn't beyond anyone's expectations. The woman had successfully captured the 3 judges' hearts. Her cooking skills made the 3 judges praise her unceasingly. After passing the special grade chef test, the woman smiled arrogantly. She slightly bowed to the 3 judges, then turned around and left. Just like that, a special grade chef was born. The test continued, one after another. The 3 judges were very strict. Some people succeeded and some failed. As long as there was a mistake, it would become the reason for them to judge the contestant as a failure. According to their understanding, a special grade chef shouldn't make any mistakes during the cooking process. Next, Hidden Dragon Continent, Bufang. While Bufang was deep in thought, one of the judges suddenly opened his mouth. Many people who were watching the cooking test were a little bewildered. Then, they whispered to each other and burst out laughing. Hidden Dragon Continent. Is it a lower realm? A mortal from the lower realm also wants to take the special grade chef test? Where does he get his confidence from? Who gave him the courage? Were mortals nowadays so arrogant? It's not easy to pass the special grade chef test. The surrounding people instantly whispered to each other, their voices full of mockery. Mu Luer frowned. Looking at Bufang, she found that his face didn't change at all. With his hands clasped behind his back, he walked toward the square. Facing the others' mockery, Bufang was too lazy to use words to refute anything. Sometimes, words were the most useless. The most effective way was to slap people's faces with facts. And what Bufang wanted to do now was to pass the special grade chef test and slap people's faces instantly. Chapter 961. It's your turn. The moment she heard Bufang's name, Mu Luer turned to look at Bufong. She had a different view from the others. Although Bufong came from the hidden dragon continent, Bufong's behavior these days had changed her opinion. She understood that this little chef from the lower realm wasn't that simple. Bufong nodded, clasping his hands as he walked forward. He seemed to have become the focus of the audience. However, it wasn't the kind that made people admire and respect him. Everyone looked at him mockingly, and their faces were filled with ridicule. As people from the Heaven Chief realm, they had their own pride. In front of them, the mortals from the lower realm were just lowly people. What they wanted to do was to see how this mortal would make a fool of himself in this test. They believed that this mortal didn't know how terrifying the special grade chef test was. Perhaps he was just hot-blooded, or perhaps this mortal thought that his cooking skills weren't bad, so he wanted to test him. However, to be honest, the special grade chef test wasn't just about cooking egg fried rice. If a plate of egg fried rice could pass the test, the Heaven Chief realm would have been flooded with special grade chefs. Perhaps everyone could open a restaurant in the Immortal City. Shortly, Bufong came to the center of the room, which was as big as a small square. There, a simple and unadorned stove was placed on it. Bufong stood in front of the stove, rolling up the sleeves of his vermilion robe. The red and white vermilion robe looked strangely beautiful. In front of the stove were the 3 judges, 2 men and 1 woman. There were 2 men and 1 woman, all of them rather old, looking like they had experienced the vicissitudes of life. However, their eyes were exceptionally picky. From the previous test, if there was any flaw, the judges would catch it and use it as a breakthrough point, which would eventually lead to the failure of the test. Thus, although the 3 of them looked incomparably old, they were extremely picky and chilling. Oh, it's a little guy from the lower realm. Interesting. It's been a long time since a mortal from the lower realm came to take the test. One of the judges was quite old. His white hair was combed delicately and meticulously. He looked at Bufong with great interest. The other 2 judges also looked on curiously. The female judge crossed her arms and played with her fingers. Her fingernails were painted bright red. Little guy, tell me the dish you're going to cook for this test. The woman played with her fingers and asked casually. Before the test, the name of the dish had to be announced to the audience. This was the rule of the test, and all the previous contestants had done so. Bufong was no exception. He didn't want to be special. After thinking for a while, he rubbed his chin and said, "Then, I'll make a portion of Buddha jumps over the wall." Oh, what was Buddha jumps over the wall? The audience and the judges were slightly stunned. And the point is, why do you, a mortal, sound so indifferent? It's as if you just thought of making this dish on the spur of the moment. Thought of it on the spur of the moment? The audience was a little speechless. Every contestant who came to take the test would carefully prepare a dish. Moreover, they had to practice unceasingly so that they wouldn't make any mistakes when cooking this dish. However, this mortal was so casual. He's going to give up on himself. Are the mortals in the lower realm so arrogant now? Or is this guy a clown invited by a monkey? Maybe he's very confident. Buddha jumps over the wall sounds. Forget it. I can't find the right words to explain it. The audience was chattering, whispering to each other. They kept sneering at Bufong. Mu Luer frowned. She sat in the audience area, looking at Bufong, who was standing calmly in front of the stove. She exhaled. She hoped that Bufong wouldn't disappoint her. Buddha jumps over the wall. Honestly, it's an interesting dish. You can start cooking now, the judge said with a smile. Bufong nodded. Buddha jumps over the wall was a dish that Bufong hadn't cooked for a long time. However, it didn't mean that Bufong had completely forgotten about it. The cooking method of this dish was still deeply engraved in Bufong's mind. The first thing to do was to prepare the ingredients. The test didn't give the contestants any ingredients. They had to bring everything by themselves. And the thing that Bufong didn't lack the least was ingredients. To Bufong, it wasn't a problem. A big chunk of demon frog meat emitted spirit energy and essence energy. Papillion claw, minced blood lobster meat, octopus tentacles, and many other ingredients. The level of these ingredients wasn't low. When Bufong placed the ingredients on the stove one by one, the taunts and discussions of the surrounding customers immediately began to disappear. So many ingredients. It seemed that this dish was somewhat different from the others. As everyone knew, the more ingredients there were, the higher the requirements for the chef. A small mistake could easily change the taste of the ingredients, which would affect the taste of the dish. And this time, the ingredients that Bufang had taken out were a little too much, right? Looking at the stove, full of ingredients, many people were dumbfounded. There were more than 10 kinds of ingredients, right? At this moment, the eyes of the 3 judges brightened. They became interested. The drowsy judge also opened his eyes, and the judge who was playing with her fingers placed her finger on her red lips, looking at Bufang. The ingredients were prepared. Next, he had to process them. His mind flickered. The dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufang's hand. As soon as the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared, a dragon roar reverberated. The dazzling golden light almost blinded the surrounding people. Swish, swish, swish. Bufang's wrist shook, and the dragon bone kitchen knife spun in his hand. After twirling the knife, it looked like a shooting star falling down. It hit the ingredients one by one. Fast, too fast. Bufang's knife skill was so fast that it dazzled many people's eyes. The surrounding people took in a breath of cold air. This knife skill isn't bad, one of the judges commented. A knife skill with fast in its name. It's a little similar to the knife skill of the Zhang family in the Immortal City. They're both fast. The judges commented, then continued to watch. The demon frog meat was cut into hexagonal pieces by Bufang. The meat was like pink jade, looking very exquisite. The other ingredients were also cut quickly. The ingredients grown in the heaven and earth farmland were also processed. A series of dazzling knife skills caused the surrounding people to hold their breaths. As soon as an expert made his move, they could tell whether it was real or not. This chef from the lower realm seems to have some skills. What's the big deal about this knife skill? In terms of speed, it's not as fast as the knife skill of the aristocratic Zhang family. The main thing is the cooking. More than 10 portions of ingredients. This fellow's mental force will be squeezed dry. Someone said unhappily. Being slapped in the face by a mortal from the lower realm was a blow to their self-esteem. What a mortal had to do was to be laughed at by them. They wanted to see this mortal make a fool of himself. Bufang took out a porcelain jar. It was the necessary porcelain jar to cook the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. It was earthy yellow, and a Buddha with a gentle face was lying on the lid. As soon as this strange thing appeared, it attracted everyone's attention. Of course, Bufang didn't care about the curiosity of the surrounding people. He carefully placed the ingredients into the porcelain jar of the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. Each ingredient was stacked in a certain order. Finally, he poured the clear heavenly mountain spirit spring water into the Buddha jumps over the wall soup. After pouring half of the soup into the bowl, Bufang closed the lid. His mind flickered, and the black turtle constellation wok appeared. The black turtle constellation wok spun in the air before smashing on the stove. This wok is a little interesting. It seems a little extraordinary, a judge said in surprise. The surrounding people didn't say anything. After pouring some water into the wok and placing the Buddha jumps over the wall soup in the middle, Bufang prepared to simmer it. He took a step back. Bufang opened his mouth. Boom! The dark gold heaven and earth obsidian flame spurted out, drilling into the bottom of the black turtle constellation wok. The surrounding people were silent for a few seconds before bursting into laughter. That scared me to death. I thought that mortal was going to spit out an immortal flame. An immortal flame is so precious. It's already not bad for him to have a low-grade heaven and earth obsidian flame. He's considered outstanding among mortals. Immortal flame? He's just a mortal. How could he control an immortal flame? Finally finding a point to ridicule, the surrounding people started to chatter again. Muluer rolled her eyes. These people were really bored to death. In the Heaven Chief realm, the ranking of flames was more strict. It wasn't as vague as the Hidden Dragon Continent. The Heaven and Earth Obsidian Flame was considered a high-grade flame. It was condensed from the spirit energy of heaven and earth, so its power wasn't ordinary. However, according to the ranking, it was divided into low grade and high grade. When a high grade heaven and earth obsidian flame appeared, the scorching heat would instantly spread several hundred meters around the body, causing the spirit energy of heaven and earth to change. Bufong's heaven and earth obsidian flame was a discerning person. With just a glance, he could tell its level. As for the immortal flame, it was also divided into low grade and high grade. If one could have an immortal flame, it would greatly increase the possibility of becoming a heaven chief. Thus, the immortal flame was the flame that every chef in the heaven chief realm yearned for even in their dreams. Bufong's heaven and earth obsidian flame was just a low-grade one. However, Bufong didn't care. After activating the heaven and earth obsidian flame, Bufong took a step back. His eyes gazed at the black turtle constellation walk. The laughter of the surrounding people gradually stopped. Seeing Bufong's action, they held their breaths. They knew that it was time to show Bufong's mental force. He was just a mortal. His mental force should be very weak, right? However, was it really weak? Bufong gently exhaled. A moment later, his mind flickered, and his spirit sea surged like a storm. Rumble, rumble. A golden dragon roar reverberated. A moment later, a terrifying mental force was released from Bufong's body. At this moment, the color of the simple and unadorned stove suddenly changed. Buzz. The radiance was like a shooting star piercing through the dark haze. It was so bright that it almost blinded people's eyes. The stove's color was dazzling silver. Chapter 962. Silver. Silver. The entire audience was dumbfounded. What was going on with the stove's color? It wasn't green like they had imagined, nor was it scarlet. It was silver. This mortal's mental force was so strong that he could make the stove glow silver. How could it be? This mortal's cultivation base was just at the level of one divine flame. Everyone here was stronger than Bufong. However, to be able to make the stove shine silver with a divine spirit realm cultivation that had ignited one divine flame, it was basically impossible. To make the stove glow silver, it meant that Bufong's mental force had reached the peak of the divine spirit realm. Moreover, it was extremely condensed. However, a divine spirit realm expert with one divine flame could show the mental force of the peak of the divine spirit realm. This contrast was really strange. The few special grade chefs who had passed the test narrowed their eyes at this moment, looking at Bufong. The eyes of the Gongshu family woman were filled with disbelief. One had to know that she had only made the stove glow crimson red. Mu Luer's eyes narrowed. The corners of her mouth rose, revealing a faint smile. Indeed, you didn't let me down. Of course, the judges were also surprised. However, they were just surprised. Although Bufong had made the stove glow silver, which surprised them, many geniuses from the aristocratic families could also do that. They had seen it many times, so they weren't that surprised. At this moment, after Bufong urged his mental force, his mental energy entered the black turtle constellation, walked like strands of silk, and began to process the ingredients within. In another room, this room was even more spacious. In the center of the square was a stove, but at this moment, a burly figure was busy working on it. Many people in the surroundings stared at the figure on the stove. Xian Yuan Xian clenched his fists. He was so nervous that his palms were sweaty. Heaven Chief. Her brother had persevered for so long to become Heaven Chief, to fulfill his dream. And now, his dream was just one step away from them. They couldn't make any mistakes. Boom! Boundless heaven and earth spiritual energy was mobilized, and in the sky above the square, boundless energy was constantly gathering. The eyes of the surrounding people were incomparably solemn. The Heaven Chief's examination is extremely difficult. The slightest mistake could result in failure. If I want to become an immortal chef, I must condense a wisp of immortal energy in my dishes. It's not that easy to condense immortal energy. It can't be the immortal energy contained in the ingredients. It must be the immortal energy condensed during the cooking process. The surrounding people were discussing, but their voices were very soft for fear that it would affect Xianyuan Shaohui's assessment. Outside the door, people kept entering the room. All the aristocratic families received this news. Someone was going to take the Heaven Chief's test. It would be fine if he didn't pass, but if he passed, they would be late and the Heaven Chief would be roped in by other aristocratic families. That would be the end of them. Therefore, this room was already filled with many people from the aristocratic families. The people from the 5 great aristocratic families of the Heaven Chief's test were all present. Tong Cheng was sitting in his seat, leaning against the wall. He was fiddling with the jade bead in his hand, which glowed unceasingly. In the Heaven Chief's test, the stove didn't have many tricks. The color of the stove didn't change. What they needed to focus on was whether they could condense immortal energy in their dishes. Only when they could condense immortal energy in their dishes could they be considered the Heaven Chief. Everyone's eyes fell on Bufang. In the square, Xianyuan Shaohui's cooking was coming to an end. Rumble, rumble. Thick layers of clouds gathered in the sky, which seemed to carry lightning bolts. The oppressive atmosphere instantly diffused and diffused. It looks like it's almost done. Someone lifted his head and saw the clouds change through the open ceiling. He couldn't help but exclaim. There was only one judge for the Heaven Chief's test, and that was Manager Chun. At this moment, Manager Chen's eyes were glued to Xianyuan Shaohui, who was busy on the stove. Just a little bit more. Manager Chen's eyes also revealed a hint of urgency. Xianyuan Shaohui was sweating, but her hands didn't stop moving. The veins on her arms bulged as she unceasingly released terrifying energy and mental force. Brother, you can do it. Xianyuan Xian's eyes were filled with anticipation. Eventually, when Xianyuan Shaohui's mental force created a storm, the lightning that had been condensing for a long time in the sky finally reached its limit. It was about to be released. There was a roar. Lightning struck from the sky. The lightning twisted and turned as though it had turned into a dragon. It's done. The immortal lightning has struck. Half of the dish is done. Let's see if the dish can condense immortal energy. If it can, our immortal city will have another Heaven Chief. Everyone was looking forward to it. The thunderbolts in the sky smashed down. Sizzling sounds echoed unceasingly, just as the lightning bolt was about to strike Xianyuan Shaohui's body. An array lit up in the room, forming a barrier above Xianyuan Shaohui's head. The lightning was broken, but it didn't fall. It didn't pose any threat to Xianyuan Shaohui. This was the special feature of the Heaven Chief's test room. It could help the examinee resist the lightning punishment after the dish was formed. The lightning dispersed. A wave of fragrance slowly wafted out. Xianyuan Shaohui's eyes were bloodshot. His entire body seemed to be drained. He quickly took a step back, gasped for breath, and sat down on the ground. His chef robe was soaked in sweat. This time, he had almost used up all of his mental force and energy. On top of the stove, there was a white porcelain bowl, which contained the dish he had cooked this time. That dish was emitting a brilliant radiance as dense steam slowly rose from the dish. As the fragrance spread out, it aroused many people's appetite. However, Xianyuan Shaohui's eyes were glued to the dish. She saw, amidst the rising steam, a wisp of thick white gas floated up, hovering above the dish and circling. That wisp of white gas lingered around the dish, making it more dazzling. Tong Cheng's eyes focused when he saw that wisp of white gas. He exhaled, "It's done. The new Heaven Chief of a mortal city is born." Swoosh! An uproar broke out. Then everyone whispered to each other and sighed endlessly. Manager Chen's heart finally calmed down. He was finally at ease. After waiting for so long, he had finally become the Heaven Chief. Xianyuan Shaohui didn't disappoint him. Xianyuan Xian was so happy that she almost jumped up from her seat. Her brother had become the Heaven Chief. He had become the Heaven Chief. That was the real high echelon of a mortal city. His status and identity had been earth-shaking, and he could open a shop in the inner circle of a mortal city where there were many aristocratic families. Many people had come to watch the Heaven Chief's test. It could be said that today's test had made Xianyuan Xiaohui's name known throughout the entire immortal city. Xianyuan Xiaohui's face was full of smiles. He had succeeded. At this moment, Xianyuan Xiaohui was so excited that he wanted to scream. She brought the dish to Manager Chun. He picked up his chopsticks, tasted it, and gave some constructive suggestions. Although Xianyuan Xiaohui had become the Heaven Chief, Manager Chin's suggestions were still useful. Xianyuan Xiaohui didn't become arrogant just because he had become the Heaven Chief. Instead, he smiled and nodded. In the distance, many experts from the aristocratic families were already eager to give it a try, looking forward to it. He looked at Xianyuan Xiaohui's figure as if he was looking at a treasure. If they could rope in a Heaven Chief, it would definitely enhance the strength of the aristocratic families. After a round of discussion, they tried to rope in him. Although Xianyuan Xiaohui was a little dull, Xianyuan Xian was very slick. He helped her brother to rope in the aristocratic families in an orderly manner. He didn't explicitly say which aristocratic family he wanted to join, nor did he explicitly reject any aristocratic family. Hence, the atmosphere was very harmonious. I wonder how Bufang's test is going. Xianyuan Xiaohui rubbed his neck, exhaling a long breath. He still had some expectations for Bufang. It was just a special grade chef's test. It shouldn't be able to stop him. Xiao Xian, let's go and watch Bufang's test. Looking at Xianyuan Xian and the young masters from the aristocratic families, Xianyuan Xiaohui scratched the back of his head. Brother, you should go first. You're the Heaven Chief now, so your status isn't ordinary. The young masters from the aristocratic families all want to rope you in. We should give them a reply. I'll stay here to discuss with the young masters. Xianyuan Xian smiled. The young masters from the aristocratic families also smiled and nodded. Then I'll go alone. Tong Chung felt a headache. He wasn't interested in these things. He was only interested in cooking. In the distance, Tong Cheng's eyes flashed and his brows arched. Brother Xianyuan, are you going to watch the special grade chef's test? I'm also going there. Let's go together. Tong Chung smiled. Of course, Xianyuan Xiaohui wouldn't refuse the young master of the Tong family's request. Then, the two of them walked out of the Heaven Chief's test room. In another room, steam rose from the black turtle constellation wok, and a thick aroma began to diffuse. It was a simple aroma, but it contained many different flavors. Each of them was marvelous, which made people exclaim in admiration. Different fragrances blended together, creating a unique aroma. It stirred up people's taste buds. However, at this moment, unknowingly in the sky outside the room, thunderbolts slowly condensed. However, no one knew that it was gathering quietly. When the three judges smelled the aroma, they got up from their seats in astonishment. They exchanged looks, seeing the surprise in each other's eyes. This aroma, it smells so good. Every bit of the aroma blends perfectly. It's unbelievable. No matter what, I can't stand it anymore. The three judges exclaimed in admiration. The audience was dumbstruck. When the aroma wafted out, they became silent. This fragrance, it seemed like this mortal had really perfectly fused more than a dozen ingredients together. Were all mortals so awesome now? In the field, Bufang's mental force expanded like waves. The spirit spring water in the black turtle constellation wok was boiling. All of a sudden, Bufang opened his eyes. He exhaled deeply. In the next moment, the earthen yellow porcelain jar was controlled by Bufang's mental force. It slowly flew out of the black turtle constellation wok, and scalding hot water flowed down the porcelain jar. The golden light suddenly burst forth and scattered in all directions. The Buddha on the porcelain pot seemed to come alive. That's the Buddha jumps over the walls soup? The Heaven Chief's test didn't have the Buddha jumps over the walls soup. This was the first time they had seen such a dish, so they were a little surprised. The three judges had already stood up. Their eyes were fixed on the porcelain pot. The steam and aroma seeped out of the porcelain pot. It almost intoxicated the audience. Bufang was a little surprised. He raised his head. Rumble. A thunderous sound reverberated in the entire field. In the next instant, everyone in the room was dumbstruck. Mu Lunar's jaw dropped. The three judges lost their composure, and the audience was bewildered. Xin Yuan, Xiaohui, and Tong Cheng, who had just arrived at the entrance of the special grade chef test room, were a little bewildered. Were they in the wrong room? How could there be lightning punishment in the special grade chef test? Xin Yuan Xiaohui was bewildered. A moment later, his rough face showed a frightened look. He took in a breath of cold air. No way that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.